Chapter 74. Private Huanghua Women's College. This was a school for nobles built around Mount Shiranui, funded by the Daiso Financial Group. Although there were also commoner students, the admission requirements for commoner students were extremely strict, so there were not many of them. Due to the restrictions of the admission conditions, the commoner students' academic performance was very good. Although it had not reached the point of polarization, there was always an insurmountable generation gap between them and the aristocratic daughters. Coupled with the difference in family background and the unique phenomenon of small groups, it could be said that the commoner students who were in the minority were always discriminated against to a certain extent in this school. But there were always exceptions, and Chihaya Fukuyama was a special case among special cases. Because of her beautiful appearance and unique temperament that was both cold and mysterious, she was the representative of the commoners. Together with the representative of the noble ladies, Mizuki Takemiya, she was known as the big sister of Huanghua. She was admired by most of the girls in Huanghua. However, at this moment, the big sister who carried the admiration of most of the girls in Huanghua Women's College was wearing sloppy sportswear and old-fashioned black-rimmed glasses. Her messy almond-colored hair was simply tied into a ponytail and hung in front of her chest. Her slender legs were curled up on the chair as she yawned and lowered her head to check the family's expenses and budget. If the noble ladies in the school saw this, they would probably immediately understand the reality of the world and the heartache of having their dreams shattered. This old man has thought of this for a long time. I've raised you to be such a two-faced person. I'm really sorry to your parents who entrusted you to this old man. A wizened old man sat on a shabby sofa. His gaze passed over the pornographic magazine in his hand and landed on Chihaya Fukuyama, who looked exactly like an otaku. He then pretended to cry. "So noisy, Grandpa." The girl half opened her dead fish eyes and glared at the old man. "Speaking of which, you secretly went to the video store to rent a lot of weird BDs without telling me, right?" The advancement of technology really makes this old man blush with shame. The old man's gaze drifted back to the pornographic magazine. "I really don't want to hear this from someone who is more familiar with Xbox 2 and PS5 than I am." The girl sighed helplessly. "It's always like this. It's very difficult for me to check the budget. Although I think it's useless to say anything, can you be a little more careful not to read that kind of book in front of your granddaughter?" "My lovely granddaughter, are you going to deprive this poor old man of his last bit of pleasure?" The old man squeezed out a few drops of tears. "I just hope that before you read it your lovely granddaughter is still here. And what the R18 in the upper right corner of the book means." The girl turned her head and continued to read the book. "And was thinking about how to allocate next month's budget. Chinzeo, if it weren't for the fact that you're about to become a god, you'd definitely be a good wife." Looking at the girl's slim figure, the old man couldn't help but sigh. "I don't have to worry about no one inheriting my coffee shop. It's a pity that there's one less good woman in this world." With a bang, the young girl slammed the pen in her hand on the table, giving the old man a fright. "I'm going to wash my face." Chihaya Fukuyama jumped down from the chair and quickly walked out of the room. Her footsteps slowed down when she arrived at the dimly lit corridor due to the setting sun. "It's not like I want to become that kind of thing." It was only then that she muttered softly. Although it was also said that the current human gods were the products of ghosts or other supernatural creatures that appeared in human form and were deified, in the literature such as the Book of Sleeves, it referred to the ascension of a human to a god, or the existence of a half-human and half-god. Chihaya Fukuyama belonged to the latter category. It was said that her ancestors had a certain bloodline of the Hupachuan dragon god, so there were often people with spiritual power in their family. Chihaya Fukuyama was the rarest of them. She was a descendant who inherited the position of the dragon god to a certain extent. Even in the long history of the mountain family, there were only two people with this characteristic. Because the divine position had not been awakened when they were young, they did not realize that they had this kind of power. Many times they would unconsciously cause some supernatural phenomena. Without the power to control the divine position, there was naturally no way to prevent these supernatural phenomena from happening, and these kinds of phenomena often led to bad consequences. For example, as the name suggested, the Hupachuan dragon god was the god of rivers and had a natural affinity with water. So when Chihaya Fukuyama got close to a water pipe, the pipe would burst easily. When she stood on a bridge, the water level would rise abnormally. When she accidentally touched a fire hydrant, the iron fire hydrant would be flushed into the sky by the water. It was because of these frequent occurrences that before the Yin-Yang hut found her, Chihaya Fukuyama was always regarded as a jinx. Not only was she isolated, even her biological parents almost abandoned her. If she hadn't opened a coffee shop and her grandfather, who had an independent source of income, hadn't found out earlier and forcefully taken custody of her, the little girl who was still in kindergarten at that time would have ended up in an orphanage. By the way, although they lived together, her grandfather did not seem to have encountered the trouble that Chihaya Fukuyama brought. According to the people in the Yin-Yang hut, although Chihaya Fukuyama's grandfather did not have any psionic powers, he seemed to be a kind person for 10 lifetimes. In short, he was extremely lucky and could completely offset the negative effects of Chihaya Fukuyama being a human god. But even so, her childhood experience still made Chen Zhao's personality a little cold. Coupled with the fact that she was now a candidate for the god of life, she naturally had a kind of otherworldly temperament that surpassed human beings. She didn't have much contact with people anymore, and she had a sufficient sense of mystery. Therefore, it was understandable that those young ladies who hadn't experienced much of the world would yearn for her. After entering Phoenix Academy, the young lady also changed a little. For example, she made her first friend in life, Asahi Sakurakanji. Asahi Sakurakanji was the first to interact with her. Even though she treated him coldly, he was not discouraged and finally became friends. Of course, Asahi Sakurakanji insisted that Chihaya Fukuyama could become the god that she served, so she refused to call him friend. Speaking of her only friend, Chihaya Fukuyama could not help but feel worried. A week ago, Asahi Sakurakanji had taken leave due to some matters. But she did not expect that once she took leave, there would be no news of her for an entire week. She went to the shrine on White Bell Mountain but could not find her. Even the god who usually drank tea and basked in the sun at the shrine was nowhere to be seen. Seriously, she said that she was going to serve me in the future, but in the end she can't be found. After washing her face, Chihaya Fukuyama grumbled softly as she returned to the living room. In the end, she found that her grandfather was no longer inside. Perhaps he had returned to the coffee shop to continue working. And that extremely hot magazine was still left on the sofa. Seriously, she muttered softly. Just as she was about to tidy up, the doorbell rang from the door. Who is it? Chihaya rubbed his forehead in annoyance. Express delivery. Opening the door, there was a delivery man wearing a baseball cap outside. This is your express delivery, please sign for it. After passing the receipt to Chihaya and stamping it, the delivery man left behind a large cardboard box and quickly drove away. Fresh food? Grandpa's really. What kind of rubbish did he buy on the internet again? Looking at the cardboard box with the word living on it, the young lady sighed helplessly. Chapter 75. The box was about a head shorter than Chihaya Fukuyama, and its width and thickness were only average. If one had to describe it, it looked like a coffin. What a bad association. Chihaya Fukuyama rubbed her forehead. Since Grandpa bought it, let him open it himself. Judging from its size, the box should be quite heavy. Although Chihaya Fukuyama was good at sports, her physical strength was only at the level of an ordinary girl. It would be bad if she couldn't lift the box and ended up crushing herself. The Fukuyama family's house was a commercial and residential house. The front door of the house was used as a coffee shop, and the back was where Chihaya and her grandpa lived. Just as Chihaya was about to walk through the house to find her grandpa, the box suddenly shook. The girl was frightened and took a step back. She cautiously kept a certain distance from the box and carefully looked at it. As if to prove that she wasn't mistaken, the box shook again. Then, as if there was some small animal inside, the box started to sway left and right. Just as Chihaya was at a loss of what to do, the box finally lost its balance and fell to the ground with a thud. Then it completely quieted down. Could it be that the creature label doesn't mean fresh product, but living thing? Chihaya muttered to herself. As a candidate for the human god, she naturally knew that there were many incredible creatures in this world. Although she hadn't seen them with her own eyes, it didn't stop her from being wary of this box of unknown origin. If she left it alone, would it starve to death? She walked around the box, but it didn't move at all. Chihaya couldn't help but feel a little confused. So she carefully approached the box and carefully looked at the label on it. She found that not only was there a custom stamp, there was also a label full of Chinese characters. Is this from Huaxia? Wait, this is... She carefully looked at the label full of Chinese characters. Although she couldn't understand the meaning of many of the words, she understood the name on it. Asahi Sakura Kanji. Did Asahi send this to me? As one of her few friends, Chihaya trusted Asahi quite a lot. So she took out a kitchen knife from the house. Aside from cutting the tape, it could also be used for self-defense. She then gulped and opened the box lying on the ground. Inside was a blonde loli with 2 ponytails in the posture of under. But the little girl's face looked haggard and she seemed to be muttering things like, "I've been cheated. This is not a trip. Without landlord I'm going to die." And so on. For a moment she didn't know what to do. Should I help her up? Why is in the box's hand? Could it be that Jari went to China to become a human trafficker? A mess of thoughts occupied Chihaya's mind. Except for the time when she found out that she was a human god candidate, this was probably the most troublesome situation she had ever encountered in her life. Then Chihaya noticed that something was wrong. The little girl wasn't speaking Japanese, but she could understand it. Obviously, this wasn't an ability that a normal creature could have. She was a supernatural creature. He guessed right. Unlike Su Xinxing's blessing of all races, which had a similar effect to language proficiency, Jasmine herself did not have the ability to learn the languages of other races. From the beginning to the end, Emily had been speaking the language of her hometown. But as the demon king who had conquered many worlds, she had the ability to let others understand her language, the language of all races. She wasn't more mysterious than Emily, her combat power wasn't more powerful than Emily, and her subordinates weren't more powerful than Emily. Anyone who didn't meet any of these 3 conditions would be considered a target of dominance. In this case, Emily's language was on the same level as the language of the god or demon king they believed in. She could ignore the language barrier and reach the target's heart. This was one of the reasons why the demon king's language could easily confuse people. By the way, this ability was usually sealed together with Emily's magic. This time there was no time for her to learn Japanese from scratch, so Su Xinxing undid a little bit of the seal and let her take back this ability. If Chihaya didn't have a certain degree of divine status and was immune to the language of gods, she probably wouldn't have noticed the fact that Emily was speaking another language. No matter what, this girl was sent here by Asahi, so it was better to entertain her. After a moment of mental struggle, Chihaya decided to continue trusting her only friend. "Do you want to eat something?" Chihaya tried asking. "You haven't eaten or drunk in a long time, right?" After all, Huaxia was quite far from here. Although Chihaya hadn't left the country before, it would take at least 2 or 3 days for such a large box to go through customs, right? Although the fact that he wasn't detained at customs was still quite miraculous. "Eat something?" Hearing Qian Zhao's words, the blonde loli regained some spirit. She raised her head and looked at Qian Zhao. That pitiful look made Qian Zhao, who was quite cold in front of outsiders, couldn't help but feel her heart soften. In the end, she helped the little girl into the house and cooked some egg porridge for her. The blonde loli held a small spoon and ate the egg porridge mouthful by mouthful. But her mental state was still a little weak. She looked sickly and dispirited. Chihaya felt that it might be because she had been stuffed in the box for a long time. Putting himself in her shoes, if he was stuffed in such a small and dark space, unable to speak or move, unable to even satisfy his physiological needs, his mental state wouldn't be much better. Thinking of this, Chihaya couldn't help but sympathize with this little girl even more. I'm Chihaya Fukuyama. What's your name? Sai? The girl subconsciously spat out a series of incomprehensible syllables. It could even be said that it was difficult for a human's vocal cords to produce. Then she seemed to have thought of something and repeated, Emily? Not a bad name. Chihaya tried to praise her. If the girls in Phoenix Academy heard Chihaya praising their names, they would probably faint from happiness, right? However, Jasmine was completely unmoved by this. This made Chihaya feel a little awkward. Surely it was better to let grandfather communicate with her? Although Chihaya's grandfather was a little wretched, this description was actually quite reserved, but he was surprisingly good at communicating with people. Thank you for your hospitality. Just as Chihaya was thinking, Emily had already finished her egg porridge. She put down her chopsticks and said seriously, I will repay you. Chapter 76. Although Chihaya Fukuyama did not expect the other party to do something as dramatic as a crane repaying her kindness, But after saying that she would repay him, that little fellow disappeared in a blink of an eye. Even after searching the entire house he still could not find her, so he guessed that she had already left. Could it be an existence like Swishinji? In the end, the puzzled Qianzhao could only keep her suspicions to herself. The next morning, the breakfast in the house deep in the mountains was not cooked, nor was there any cloth or other things like that. Looks like that little fellow was indeed not around anymore. This made Chihaya have a subtle feeling that he had been cheated. Shaking her head, she tossed that feeling to the back of her mind. Using her fastest speed, she prepared her usual Japanese breakfast. She changed her old-fashioned black-rimmed glasses into contact lenses, combed her long almond-colored hair, and changed into her school uniform. After tidying up her appearance, she shouted softly, "I'm going out," and left the house. Although Phoenix Academy had its own student residences, but firstly, the luxurious European-styled residence was rather expensive, and if he had to fork out this amount of money, the remote mountains family would be unable to make ends meet. Chihaya had no interest in experiencing the remote mountains family affairs kind of plot. Secondly, it was already very tiring to maintain the image of a top student in school. If he were to stay in the student residences even after school, he would not be able to remove his mask. Looking at it this way, it was indeed more relaxing to stay at home. Phoenix Academy was situated on a small island, and was built along the White Bell Mountain. Adding on to the Western style of Rococo architecture, it would give people the misconception that they had come to another country. The city's trams did not lead directly to Phoenix Academy, but there was a tram stop in front of a bridge that looked like the London Tower Bridge. After alighting from there would be a school bus that would pick you up. All in all, Chihaya Fukuyama's school journey required one to first take the tram, and then transfer to the school bus before reaching Phoenix Academy. And Fusang's trams were famous for producing a certain kind of creature that was named after a wolf. Although she had never met one before, but today Chihaya felt that someone was caressing her buttocks in the crowded carriage. She turned around and glared fiercely at the person behind her. The other party was a very inconspicuous young man. He was wearing a t-shirt that was a little yellow because it had been washed too many times, and the lower half of his body was wearing a pair of Hawaiian beach pants that didn't look like a decent person's. At this moment, the hedgehog-headed young man was holding an old flip phone in his right hand and looking at Chihaya innocently. Feeling that the warning was enough, Chihaya turned around and looked at the portable vocabulary book in his hand again, silently memorizing the English words. Not long after, the feeling of being caressed came again. Her hand that was holding the vocabulary book trembled. She tried to hold it in for a moment and then suddenly turned around. The passerby youth obviously didn't expect her to suddenly do this. He still kept his body leaning forward, his face slightly lowered as if he was studying the posture of the girl's buttocks. He trembled as he raised his head, only to see the girl's cold gaze and almost expressionless face. "Wait, actually you've misunderstood." The other party hurriedly waved his hand, trying to explain himself. "Mr." Chihaya looked at him with disdain and took out her phone. "If you have anything to say, please go to the police station and slowly tell it to the police." Dividing line. Facing the angry girl, Su Shinxing felt that this was the most disadvantageous situation he had ever been in since he became the world's savior. Even when he was fighting with the Demon King, he wasn't that weak. The story started a few minutes ago. Due to the Super Administrative Office's lack of funds, although Su Shinxing entered the country by air, Emily was sent here by mail. Mail category was pet. After getting off the plane, Su Shinxing originally wanted to go to the house where Emily was supposed to stay, but the people from Enyang Liao found Su Shinxing and told him that Emily had already gone to Phoenix Academy. Therefore, Su Shinxing, who didn't get a ride on the Enyang Liao bus, could only take the tram to Phoenix Academy. So far, everything had been going smoothly. But as the number of people in the tram gradually increased, the distance between him and the girl in front of him gradually shortened. When the distance between them was so short that they could touch each other with just a stretch of their hands, something unexpected happened. The fragment of the deity tablet that was bounced off by Yunlin and had been drifting around Su Shinxing suddenly stuck to the girl in front of him, and it just so happened that it stuck to her butt. After looking at her butt for a while, Su Shinxing took out his phone. Because of the cost of international long-distance calls, he hesitated for a long time, but in the end he still sent a message to Qin Xingyan. What if the deity tablet entered her butt? Waiting online, it's quite urgent. After a while the other party replied. Can you not send such sexual harassment messages when I'm in class? Su Shenxing tried to send a few more messages to explain himself, but he didn't receive a reply. So he finally sadly confirmed that he seemed to have been blacklisted by the other party. No matter what, Su Shenxing wouldn't let the fragment of the deity tablet inexplicably enter the body of an ordinary person. Putting aside whether those old guys in the Bailu temple would be so angry that they would vomit blood and die if they found out that the deity tablet they regarded as a treasure was so attached to someone else's, but just the fact that an ordinary person couldn't withstand the explosion of the deity tablets. But let me say the power of the deity tablet made Su Shenxing unable to ignore it. Of course, as an idiot in magic, it was too difficult for Su Shenxing to use magic or spells to solve the current situation, so he could only try to pull off the deity tablet stuck to the girls but with his hands. But it seemed that not only was the effect not very good, even he himself was regarded as a pervert. God pity him, his hands didn't even touch the girls' private parts. It was all an illusion caused by the deity tablet squirming there. But how on earth could he explain the reason for this to an ordinary person? Su Shenxing remained silent for a moment, and finally under the other party's bone-chilling gaze he said seriously, "Don't worry, I'm not interested in people of your age." He grinned and gave a thumbs up, "Because I'm a lolicon." "Hello, is this the police station?" The other party didn't hesitate to call the police. Not good. If he was caught by the police and sent back to his country, it would become a stain that he would never be able to wash off. He would definitely be mocked to death by Su Feng and Xiao Jingyi. Although there was still a distance to Phoenix Academy, but it wasn't the time to hesitate. So he straightforwardly opened the window of the tram and shouted "Sarah," and jumped out of the window. Fortunately, this tram model was slightly older. If it was a fully enclosed carriage, then Su Shenxing could only use his head to smash open the window. "Wait, it's dangerous." The young lady was shocked by his actions and hurriedly ran to the window, but Su Shenxing's figure had already disappeared. Chapter 77. A champagne-colored Rolls-Royce Phantom was quietly driving on the road. Mizuki Takemiya leaned on the leather sofa at the back of the car, taking a nap. Although she was considered a resident student, but as she had already started to take over part of her family's business, she often needed to go out to handle various matters, so occasionally she would stay outside the school. Regarding this point, Phoenix Academy had also turned a blind eye to it on account of Fei Gong family. Last night, this young miss of Fei Gong family had attended a high society banquet, chatting and laughing with various businessmen and politicians. After leaving the banquet, she immediately flew to Okinawa, where she and the Daiso Financial Group's representatives schemed, and after signing a series of cooperation agreements. Finally, she took the Fei Gong family's private jet back to Bailing County, and took a car back to Phoenix Academy. Other than the short rest on the plane, Mizuki Takemiya had not slept well for almost the entire night. But this was already considered a common occurrence. After agreeing to her father's conditions, she was already aware of it. Fei Gong family was an old family in Fusang, and it was said that there were already traces of them being active during the shogunate era. Whether this legend was true or false, but it was true that since the Taisho era, Fei Gong family had occupied a considerable portion of Fusang's business world. However, since the beginning of the Showa period, Fusang's business world had blossomed. In addition, the people who were in charge of the imperial concubines family were the older generation, which made this once glorious family on the verge of collapse. Fortunately, Mizuki Takemiya's father suddenly emerged, and directly sent those old fellows who had monopolized power to the old people's home, and boldly and decisively carried out reforms in Fei Gong family, which caused this unstable family to once again settle down. Without a doubt, Mizuki Takemiya's father, who had done all this, was a man with an iron fist and a firm will. Once he had decided on something, no one could change it, even if it was his only daughter, Mizuki Takemiya. At the same time, he was also the most standard businessman. It's fine if you don't want to marry, but you have to show value that exceeds the benefits that the marriage can bring. Mizuki Takemiya felt that he would never forget the way he looked at him, as if he was sizing up an item. After that, the man who was her father handed over some of the family business to the concubine Gong Rueishi. In order to respond to the other party's expectations, Rueishi tried her best to do everything to the best of her ability. That was why she had become who she was now, the genius girl that everyone praised, the business genius that her employees admired, and the big sister in the eyes of her classmates. It's not enough. Mizuki Takemiya sighed softly. He knew that this alone was not enough to make his iron-willed father see him in a different light. Was it really a good idea to continue like this? Why was he working so hard and studying so hard? Was there any meaning to it? Perhaps he would be happier if he married into a better family? However, deep in the girl's heart, there was always a stubborn thought that made her reject these weak thoughts. She wouldn't grumble in vain. Rather than having that time, she might as well grab the opportunity to have a good rest. By the time they reached Phoenix Academy, she would once again be able to display her big sister attitude in front of everyone. Big sister. Every time this happened, Rueishi would always subconsciously think of another girl who was called Big Sister by the Academy's students. Different from her, although Chihaya Fukuyama was always cold, but he always had a kind of leisurely atmosphere, just like a kitten that liked to take a stroll. Even if he was cold and indifferent to people, he would still give people a feeling of healing. Probably only a commoner would be able to nurture such a miraculous temperament. Sometimes Mizuki Takemiya envied Chihaya Fukuyama, and Chihaya Fukuyama was one of the few people that she could talk to. Different from others, Chihaya would never try to curry favor with her, nor would he have the slightest gap because of her status or anything else. If it had to be said, it was probably that cold look which made people feel that it was hard to get close to him. But after interacting with Chihaya Fukuyama for a long time, one would be able to feel that under that cold exterior, there was still a kind heart. Just as Mizuki Takemiya's imagination was running wild and her thoughts were about to sink into dreamland, a violent collision and a loud bang that caused her ears to ring pulled the young lady back to reality. Not knowing when, a van suddenly rushed out from the fork in the road, ignoring the traffic lights, and fiercely crashed into the front side of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Thanks to the safety features brought about by its high price, the Rolls-Royce Phantom wasn't directly destroyed by the collision. It was only knocked to one side and finally, like an arrow, it plunged into the side of the road building. Woo! The pain on her calf made the frightened Mizuki Takemiya regain her senses. She lightly touched the wound and judged that the bone was fine. It should only be a scratch or contusion. From the back seat, she could see that the airbag on the driver's side popped out normally. She called out twice, but the driver didn't respond. She didn't know if he fainted or something else. The girl took a deep breath and desperately tried to calm herself down. A traffic accident? No, she felt that the van's appearance was a bit strange. The target is here. A strange man's voice faintly came from outside the window. Target? The feeling of uneasiness in the girl's heart grew stronger and stronger. She wanted to open the door and leave this place as soon as possible, but the door was a bit deformed, so it was very difficult to open it. In addition, the girl's current position made it difficult for her to open the door. Suddenly, the door was pulled open from the outside. Then the other person grabbed Mizuki Takemiya's arm and violently dragged her out of the car. Then several pairs of hands carried her in a direction. The girl's vision lit up. It seemed that she had finally left the half-collapsed building. However, the scene in front of her made her heart sink to the bottom. She was now in an alley. Looked like it was behind the building. There was a van parked at the end of the alley. The burly men around her didn't look like rescue personnel from the fire department or the police department. Kidnappers. In an instant, this word appeared in the girl's mind. Then, like a tidal wave, a huge wave of fear surged in her heart. Kidnappers generally wanted money. As the daughter of the Miyazaki family, it was understandable that she was targeted. The problem was that she knew that her father was the kind of person who would never compromise with criminals. Since that was the case, she was likely to become a punching bag for the criminals. She was afraid that she would usher in the most tragic end. The van was blocking the intersection. Escaping was almost impossible. Instead of falling to that point, it was better to die here. So Mizuki Takemiya fiercely bit the hand that grabbed her arm. The moment the other person subconsciously let go of her arm, she slammed her head into a huge metal valve in the alley. But she didn't succeed. The criminal next to her immediately reacted and kicked her to the ground. Mizuki Takemiya, whose leg was injured, naturally couldn't stand up quickly. Thus, she could only watch helplessly as the burly man whom she had bitten cursed and raised his hand to attack her. The girl closed her eyes and mentally prepared herself to be beaten. But for some reason, although she heard the sound of being beaten, she didn't feel any pain at all. So she carefully opened her eyes and found that the kidnappers had all fallen to the ground. They were foaming at the mouth and unconscious. The van at the entrance of the alley was like it was hit by a tank. It broke in half and flipped over on the road. The sun shone in from the entrance of the alley. In the glow, a young man wearing a t-shirt and beach pants with a smile on his face slowly walked towards her like a god. Then he spoke. "Oh my god, I accidentally got lost. Hey girl, can I ask for directions?" Chapter 78. After experiencing the strange pervert incident on the tram, Chihaya Fukuyama arrived at Phoenix Academy and found the atmosphere in the class a little strange. Generally speaking, there was a feeling of restlessness. If one listened carefully, they seemed to be able to hear words like concubine's palace and kidnapping. But other than Asahi Sakura Kanji, she did not have any friends in the class, and the others did not take the initiative to talk to her because of their respect for her as an elder sister, so even if they cared, they would not be able to find out the whole story. Although she could just casually ask any student and they would be overwhelmed by her favor and spit out all the information they knew, but this would make things very troublesome for her, so she gave up on this plan. Not long after, the teacher's arrival made the atmosphere in the class settle down a little. First of all, I have a piece of good news for everyone. Asahi Sakura Kanji's family matters have finally been settled and she will be returning to school tomorrow. The teacher put down the tablet in her hand and clapped her hands to get everyone's attention before she said cheerfully. The young ladies started to discuss, and for a moment, everyone seemed to have forgotten the rules of being a lady. But this also meant that the gentle Asahi, even though she was a fujoshi, was very popular among the students. "Hey little kittens, don't continue to make noise. The court meeting is not over yet." The teacher clapped her hands again to get the students to quieten down. "There's another thing to announce. From today onwards, our class will have an additional adorable kitten." According to this teacher's quirk, it meant that there was a transfer student. Chihaya supported her chin with one hand and the whatever part of her mind was thinking absent-mindedly. The other students seemed to be very interested and waited for the teacher to introduce the new student. Feeling that she had whetted the student's appetite, the teacher smiled and said to the door, "Suemo Lee, you can come in now." The students in the classroom subconsciously looked towards the door. For a long time nothing happened. The homeroom teacher awkwardly pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose and tried to call out, "Suemo Lee?" But there was still no response from outside. So she did not care that she was wearing a skirt and quickly ran to the door to open it, only to find that there was no one outside. "Emoli Su. He's gone." The pitiful homeroom teacher let out a sorrowful wail as if he was a member of the Moonlight clan whose salary was about to be cut. After a few minutes of chaos, the homeroom teacher, who was on the verge of breaking down, finally found Emoli in the courtyard and brought her back to class. After enduring till the end of class with much difficulty, in order to avoid those curious students, Chihaya had no choice but to head to the student council's office classroom. As the vice president, being able to use the student council's office as she wished was a pretty good benefit. But when she reached the classroom, she discovered that there was already someone who had arrived earlier. "Greetings, student from the remote mountains." The other party stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the White Bell Mountain. Because of the sound of the door opening, the other party discovered Chihaya and unhurriedly turned around, using a ladylike action to greet her. "Good morning, Senior Feigong." Seeing that the person in the room was, in some sense, a young lady who was in the same predicament as herself, Chihaya relaxed a little. "Is that lackey of yours not around today?" As for little Jean, because teacher has something to discuss with the student council president, so she's at the office. Mizuki Takemiya smiled as she replied. Following that, the both of them simultaneously fell into silence. After a moment, Chihaya took the initiative to ask, "This morning, did anything happen? It's not a happy matter." Mizuki Takemiya turned around and placed one hand on the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out of the window in a daze. "Sorry. No need to apologize, it's not something that you can't tell anyone." Mizuki Takemiya smiled slightly and then revealed a serious expression. "Hey, student from the remote mountains, do you believe in love at first sight?" Chapter 79. Su Shinshing and Asahi Sakura Kanji were walking on the path leading to the Shiranui shrine. Asahi Sakura Kanji, who was leading the way, looked back at Su Shinshing several times. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end he gave up. Looking at Asahi Sakura Kanji, who seemed to want to say something, Su Xinxing finally sighed and took the initiative to ask. Is there anything you want to say to me? That I remember you told Mr. Su Feng that you were going to sneak into the academy. That's right. Didn't we sneak in without being discovered? No, that's not it. Asahi Sakura Kanji wanted to cry but had no tears. You were discovered by the bodyguards of the other students as soon as you approached the academy. Then, when you knocked down the bodyguards, you were also discovered by the security guards of the academy. So, you simply knocked down all the guards of the academy and climbed over the wall to get in. It doesn't matter as long as we weren't discovered by the students and teachers of the academy. What's the difference between sneaking in without alerting anyone and knocking down all the people in the way? That's why it's not called sneaking in. It doesn't matter. I've already asked the ghosts to make those guys lose their memories physically. Even if they wake up, they won't remember anything. That's not the point. Well, to be able to let me see a real fall, I'm very grateful. Well, it seems that I have to reflect on my sneaking method. Why? The two of them noisily arrived at the Shiranui shrine. Although it was a shrine, in fact, because Asahi Sakura Kanji and the god she originally served lived here, the shrine was full of life, except for the rope bells outside, the tournament box, and the slightly smaller shrine inside. Su Xinxing even saw a girl's underwear on a chair. What are you looking at? The embarrassed girl hurriedly went up and put away the underwear that was obviously much too big for her. Lord Fate is really always throwing things around. Asahi Sakura Kanji complained as he cleaned up. He wanted to pretend that he didn't care, but his expression became lonely. Su Xinxing, who didn't know how to comfort her, could only sigh helplessly. He looked around and noticed that there was a lot of dust in Sakura Kanji's house, probably because there was a lot of dust in the mountains. Sakura Kanji had only been away from the shrine for about a week, but there was already a lot of dust in the house. There were no traces of it being touched, which meant that no one had come in this week. Sahi, you deliberately didn't clean up the things of the previous god. Do you think she will come back? Ing Xiaolu's hands stopped in the middle of packing things, and her thin shoulders trembled slightly. It seemed that he had guessed correctly. Unfortunately, that was impossible. Su Xinxing once mistakenly ate fried rice made by the ghosts, which greatly impacted his spirit. As a result, he received the spiritual message left by Yakumo on Asahi Sakura Kanji. Therefore, he knew very well that Yakumo was not missing, but had completely disappeared. She returned her existence to Tsukuyami, and in the process she seemed to have affected an innocent person. In exchange for a powerful divine power, she used it to seal the demon's soul on Asahi and in the dry well, so that Asahi Sakura Kanji could live a normal life. At the end of her life, she made a wish to her successor that Asahi Sakura Kanji could live a happy life in the future. Just like Asahi Sakura Kanji's real mother. If you really can't accept the fact that she is no longer here, it doesn't matter even if you keep those things. In the end, Su Xinxing still didn't tell Asahi Sakura Kanji everything he knew. I don't have high requirements for daily living conditions. In general, as long as there was salt and water, one could live. No, it's okay. The girl shook her head and forced a smile. I also know that it's not okay to continue like this. As she said that, she packed up those things again. But this time, while she was packing up, she would tell Su Xinxing about the past of those things as if they were her family's treasures. This bug pouch was made for me when I went out with Master Ming to catch a spade worm when I was young. However, Master Ming is not good at handwork, so she made it very ugly. I even got into a fight with her because of this. In the end, Master Ming brought me a spade worm early in the morning. Later on, I found out that she didn't sleep the whole night just to catch that worm for me. This cheap bracelet with a cross was bought by Ming-sama from the town when I couldn't sleep after watching a horror movie. At that time, she told me that it was a treasure blessed by the gods from Takamajahara. With this, I didn't have to be afraid of anything. I foolishly believed her and always wore this bracelet with me. It was not until Ming-sama told me the truth when I was 12 years old that I took it off. This fishing rod was made by Ming-sama when she said that she wanted to eat icy lobster. But because the town was too far away and the budget allocated by Inyang Liao was not much, I could only go to the beach to try fishing. Although I didn't catch any lobster in the end, I accidentally caught a snapper. Ming-sama was very happy to tell me. This doll was my favorite prize when the small town at the foot of the mountain was about to move. When the last temple fair was held, Ming-sama and I went to the shooting booth together. In the end, I spent all my pocket money and didn't get anything. But Ming-sama secretly helped me get this doll. Although I felt sorry for the stall owner, I was really happy at that time. This bottle of sake was bought by Ming-sama when Huanghua Academy was building around White Bell Mountain. Because Daiso Financial Group agreed to let me go to school for free, Ming-sama was happy and used the money that she had saved to buy it. She said that she would keep it until I got married. Sob. The girl bit her lips tightly, trying hard not to let the tears in her eyes fall. I think that crying at this time might make you feel a little better. Su Xinxing sat quietly by the side, listening to the girl talk about the past between her and the deity who had already disappeared. Seeing the girl's eyes gradually turning red and her voice becoming more and more nasal, he could only give this suggestion. Ming-sama said that, the only place where a witch can cry is the toilet and in the deity's arms. Asahi said softly. Su Xinxing sighed again and pulled the girl into his arms. Then it's okay. I'm more or less a deity now. You don't have to endure it? Yes, of course. Chapter 80. Mizuki Takemiya was in love. Chihaya Fukuyama believed that if news of this were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge commotion in Phoenix Academy. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that this child who was circling around Mizuki Takemiya was definitely something that they would not be able to accept. The girl was petite, and although she was already a second-year high school student, but it would not be wrong to say that she was a junior high school student. She wore a cute pink hairband which did not match her lively temperament, and her chestnut hair was slightly curled up, looking like a dog's ears, which was why she was nicknamed Little Dog Jam. Her name was Wu Yejin, and she was the current president of Phoenix Academy's student union. At the same time, she was also the president of the non-official Big Sister Fei Gong fan club. In terms of scale, the latter was much bigger than the former. Because of this, Wu Yejin had a huge say in the academy. After Chihaya Fukuyama and Mizuki Takemiya gave up on the position of president of the student union, she naturally took up this position. I only have one goal in becoming the president, and that is to protect Big Sister Fei Gong's school life well. Other than Chihaya, there were probably quite a number of students in Phoenix Academy who had a deep impression of what Wu Yejin had said at the inauguration ceremony. Incidentally, after this, the number of people in the Big Sister Fei Gong fan club increased once again. Putting aside the morbid obsession with Mizuki Takemiya, Wu Yejin was undoubtedly an extremely outstanding president. As an aristocratic academy, Phoenix Academy's funds were sufficient and all the societies were able to obtain a considerable amount of budget. But because of this, Phoenix Academy's student union's affairs were extremely heavy, and just checking the various societies' expenses required a considerable amount of manpower and energy. But after Wu Yejin took up the position, the originally messy affairs became orderly, and under her leadership, the members of the student union, other than the two vice presidents, were extremely motivated and were even nicknamed by the students as Little Dog Jam's evil dogs. With such outstanding ability, Wu Yejin would occasionally boast to others that she would work at Mizuki Takemiya's side after graduation. Speaking of which, Father Wu Yi, who had founded Wu Yi Transportation Company from scratch, would cry. Although their assets could not be compared to the first-class financial groups like Fei Gong, but the Wu Yi family, which was mainly in logistics, was actually considered as not bad among the second-class financial groups in Japan. Senior Shinshan, you've stopped? Due to her extreme admiration for Mizuki Takemiya, Wu Yejin's attitude towards Chihaya was no different from any other ordinary student. Sorry. Qian Zhao calmed herself down and once again entered a piece of paper in front of her into the student council's notebook. But she was not but she was, after all, she was not a busy. So she to her to do. But her mind couldn't help but wander again. Maybe because they were in the same boat, Mizuki Takemiya actually told her the secret that should have been buried deep in his heart. So, as the daughter of the Fei Gong family, that girl must have endured so much pain because she didn't have anyone to talk to. Just like now, Mizuki Takemiya was no longer on campus. He went to the airport and took a private plane to attend another international business cooperation meeting. Kidnappers and whatnot. For a commoner child like Chiu Zhao, it was simply like a weekend afternoon drama. It was too far away, and she was completely unable to understand what kind of feelings it contained. Even if she encountered a criminal, at most it would be the type of idiot. Speaking of idiots, Chihaya once again remembered what happened in the morning. What kind of idiot jumped out of the window to commit suicide when he was discovered? Even if Japan was known as the country of suicide, it was too abnormal to commit suicide for such a reason. Also, she didn't know if it was just her imagination, but she felt that when Mizuki Takemiya described the person who saved her, although he added a lot of glittering special effects, but if she ignored the appearance and clothes, he was just like the idiot who jumped out of the car to commit suicide. It must be a coincidence. Maybe old t-shirts and Hawaiian-style beach pants are the latest trend? Fashion trends were never something that a commoner girl like her could understand. She had no more than 20 clothes in her closet, and half of them were school uniforms. Mayama-senpai. Wu Yejin's voice brought Chihaya back to reality. The girl sighed. If senpai is tired, please go outside and rest for a while. If you stay here, you will affect the efficiency of the other members. Hey, why did Kokuchan kick out Oniizuma? A member complained. Over there. Don't call her by that nickname. Wu Yejin's grimacing face and her somewhat fluffy hair made her look more like a puppy trying to intimidate the enemy, because Mayama-senpai's melancholy expression is too beautiful. Of course, it can't compare to Oniizuma. The other members can't help but peek. If this goes on, there will be no efficiency at all. Please go out and harm the other students. Mayama-senpai is too dictatorial, protest. But her intimidation had no effect at all, and the members of the student council were still heckling. Call me Oniizuma. If you want to be Oniizama's right-hand man, this is not enough. Hey, but I plan to inherit my mother's business. Shut up, those who don't want to be Oniizama's subordinates are not good ladies. Well, I think you don't look like a lady at all right now. Seeing the members of the student council relax a little, Chihaya silently applauded Wu Yejin for using herself as a joke to relieve pressure without leaving a trace. At the same time, she was also in awe of her acting skills. Her acting was really too realistic. Look at her face that was red from being teased. Look at her eyes that were full of tears due to shame and anger. Look at her little canine teeth that were exposed due to rising anger. Was this really acting? Chihaya suddenly felt like a storm was coming. Her early warning of disaster, which was tempered by the hardships she had experienced since childhood, was now ringing loudly. Well, I'll go out first. Thank you for your hard work. Chihaya Fukuyama left the battlefield. Then came the roar of Mayamano Wu Yejin, the student council president, from the student council. Chapter 81. He carried Asahi Sakurakanji, who had cried herself to sleep, to the old sofa in the shrine. Su Shinshing looked at the crayon drawing of an umbrella on the back of the sofa. On both sides of the umbrella handle were the words Minami-sama and Asahi written in hiragana. He couldn't help but gently stroke the girl's bangs in her sleep. The girl seemed to feel something. She turned over and murmured softly, "Minami, don't leave me behind. This is really troublesome." Su Shinshing scratched his face and looked around the shrine again. In short, it was a warm little home. It was full of life. At the same time, he could see traces of the life left by the god called Yakumo everywhere. It was natural that Asahi Sakurakanji would feel sad staying in such a place. How about erasing the girl's memory? Since he was going on a long trip, Qin Xingyan made some talismans that might be useful. One of them was the kind that could erase the memory of ordinary people. After all, Su Shinshing's memory erasing technique, physical, was a bit difficult to control. It would be a big problem if he accidentally used the cervical fracture technique. Su Shinshing looked around the room again and dismissed the idea. Although this memory would only bring pain to Sakurakanji now, no matter who it was, they would encounter something similar. The death of the family that raised them. No matter how painful and sad it was, it didn't mean that Su Shinshing could take away other people's memories of their parents. It was the most precious memory in a person's life when they grew up from a child to an adult. Let's see if I can get through to Dad's phone later. Although the international call made Su Shinshing's heart ache. While complaining about the increasing cost, Su Shinshing went to the backyard of the shrine. There was a well in the corner of the backyard. The well was surrounded by ropes, and it was covered with paper that looked like coins and various talismans that were filled with spells. It looked like a scene from the Ring of Midnight. Su Shinshing stepped over the rope without a care and arrived at the well in a few steps. Several ropes were wrapped around the well. These ropes were connected to each other at the mouth of the well and finally twisted into a strand that hung down into the well. Looking down from the mouth of the well, one could see a hanging bucket. Inside the bucket was a jade seal that was slightly yellowish in color. Su Shenxing pulled the barrel up and picked up the seal. This should be the suppressing Chuan seal that Su Feng mentioned before. Then Su Shenxing looked into the well again. It was still pitch black inside. He raised his eyebrows and then jumped into the well. Unfortunately, he didn't travel back to the Warring States period because of this. There were a few strange bones at the bottom of the well, but there was nothing else. But this didn't stop him from thinking of other ways to use the talisman. For example, he could grab the deity tablet that was drifting around him and twist it like squeezing a towel. He could squeeze out the divine power from it and use that divine power to activate the talisman. This method had already been tested in Sakura's apartment and was successful. That was why Su Shenxing asked Qin Xingyan for so many talismans. My great celestial empire's magic power is #1 in the world. Su Shenxing was just about to use the deity tablet to squeeze out divine power when he suddenly remembered that the martial god's incomplete deity tablet was no longer with him. But... He slapped his head and his gaze fell on the huge academy at the foot of the mountain. Speaking of which, I remember that her uniform is the same as Sakura Kanji's. That means she's also a student of Huanghua Academy? I have to take the deity tablet back from that, but... In any case, Emily was also there. Right now, she shouldn't have attracted anyone's attention and quietly sneaked in. When the time came, she would let the little girl cover her and take back the incomplete deity tablet. Chapter 82. After leaving the building where the student union was located, Chihaya realized that she didn't have anything in particular that she wanted to do. It was now afternoon tea time in Huanghua Academy. Ordinary commoners would either participate in club activities or stay in the classroom to revise their homework. Other than the members who were also participating in club activities, most of the young ladies would have tea parties in the backyard of the academy. As a member of the ordinary students, Chihaya definitely wouldn't participate in the upper-class tea party, although the members of the tea party would definitely welcome her with open arms. Therefore, she still went to the courtyard. As soon as she arrived, she saw a few lower-grade children huddled under a tree, looking up at the tree with a worried expression. Since she had nothing to do, Qian Zhao simply came to the side of the tree and looked up. Soon she understood what the children were looking at. A white kitten was shivering at the end of a branch, and in front of it, a large colorful snake was coiled around the root of the branch, looking at the kitten and hissing its forked tongue. If this continued, the kitten, who didn't dare to jump down, would soon become the snake's meal. Although the children under the tree wanted to stop it, they basically didn't know how to climb trees, and as girls, it was difficult to overcome their natural fear of snakes. Didn't Kai go to call the teacher? Is the teacher not here yet? Usually we can always see the patrolling security guards, but now when we need them we can't see any of them. What should we do? Should we go to the sports room and take out a mat and put it under the kitten? In the end, they could only chatter incessantly like a flock of sparrows in a state of utter stupor. This made the kitten even more afraid, but the snake wasn't affected at all and continued to approach the kitten. Chihaya looked at the little white kitten with a trace of pity in her eyes, but soon she lowered her head and planned to leave the courtyard. Because she didn't know how to climb trees, even if she went there she wouldn't be able to help. Moreover, as a child who was bullied since she was young, she understood the meaning of the law of the jungle better than those pampered young ladies. At this time she felt someone tugging at the corner of her clothes. When she turned around, she realized that Emily had appeared behind her. "Do you want to save the cat?" The little girl looked up at her and asked expressionlessly. The afternoon sun shone down on the courtyard. The girl's smooth and fair skin reflected the sunlight, making her seem like she was covered in a layer of fluorescent light. She looked like she was in a dream. "But if you save the cat, you'll turn into a snake and starve because there's nothing to eat. There's no right or wrong. It's just an action purely for the sake of survival." However, she didn't expect that this unreliable Jasmine not only planned to use words to persuade the snake to come down, but also used words that were similar to a police officer persuading a criminal. This made Chizeo suddenly have a feeling that there's something wrong with my head for believing her. However, just when everyone thought that Emily was just joking, the snake really stopped moving and slithered down the tree. The girls under the tree were so scared that they ran away. Only Emily and Chihaya were still there. But even Chihaya was a little uneasy when he saw the giant snake that was as thick as his wrist. When the snake came down, it even raised its triangular head and nodded at Emily and the girls in a very human-like way. Then it crawled into a small ditch and disappeared with a splash. It actually worked? Chihaya blinked, his eyes full of disbelief. See, I told you it's not a problem. Emily turned around and proudly straightened the washing board. This is the power of communication. Isn't it the responsibility of a witch to follow God-sama? The girl asked. Ugh, in that case he had to give up on the plan of taking this person's wallet. Su Shinxing muttered in his heart. All in all, after changing into Wei Xiusher's clothes, Su Shinxing swaggered along with Sakura Kanji to the courtyard of Huanghua Academy. The front courtyard of the academy was filled with all kinds of beautiful gardening and fountains. It was purely for viewing and not a place to rest. The rear courtyard was where the young ladies rested and held their tea party. From the point that the child needed to take the tram, he should not be the type to participate in the tea party. In addition, even the security guards were not allowed to enter the school building. In the end, the only place left to try his luck was the courtyard. In the end, Su Shinxing saw Emily and Chihaya Fukuyama in the courtyard as he wished. Very good, as expected of Emily. You've won my heart. He muttered in satisfaction and then began to walk around the courtyard, intending to change his position to observe the girls but... the broken deity tablet stuck on the girl's butt. Asahi Sakurakanji followed Su Shinxing's gaze and saw the target they were looking for. When she realized that it was Chihaya Fukuyama, she was stunned. She tugged on the sleeve of Su Shinxing's security guard uniform. After attracting Su Shinxing's attention, she leaned over to his ear and briefly introduced Chihaya Fukuyama's identity. So that's how it is. The White Bell Shrine's next deity that you were talking about is her. Su Shinxing suddenly realized. When he was at the Bailu Temple, the temple head had also imparted some knowledge about the deity tablet to Su Shinxing. Although he was asleep most of the time, there were some parts where he was forced to listen to because Qin Xingyan threatened him with rent. Among them was the part where the holders of the broken deity tablet would attract each other. Of course, this mutual attraction did not refer to a romantic relationship, but when the physical distance between them reached a certain extent, they would involuntarily move closer to each other. This was not a case of birds of a feather flocking together. It was more inclined to the argument that the broken deity tablet unconsciously wanted to devour other broken deity tablets to complete itself. Su Shinxing's deity tablet was in a broken state because the name of the Einherjar was taken away. Chihaya Fukuyama's deity tablet was a bloodline inheritance. Needless to say, the bloodline of the deity tablet's ancestors had diluted over the years, so it was understandable that the two deity tablets would attract each other. Wait, if that's the case, then there's no need for me to take back the Einherjar's deity tablet, right? Since they were going to continue discussing the current situation, Su Shinxing was not in a hurry to go out. Instead, he hid in the bushes with Sakura Kanji and whispered, "If we let it enter the girl's body to complete the deity tablet, wouldn't that make the girl directly become a deity? I think it's better to treat things like deity tablets with caution." Asahi Sakura Kanji blushed and seriously suggested, "Also, didn't you say that your deity tablet is stuck to Lord Yamanaka's but that strange part? I think there's something wrong with entering Lord Yamanaka's body from there." Su Shinxing showed an expression of disdain, "But it's so troublesome to take it off. She thought I was an idiot this morning." "It's okay, I'll go talk to Lord Yamanaka. I'm sure she'll understand." Asahi Sakura Kanji volunteered. "What are you going to say to her? For the sake of world peace, please let Lord Yamanaka touch your butt." Why does Lord Yamanaka have an expression of, "Is this guy an idiot?" You guessed right, Asahi, you're amazing. Tisk. Lord Yamanaka, do you really think that way? Well, anyway, let's contact Emily first and ask her for help. Don't ignore me, Lord Yamanaka. Chapter 84. In the alley behind the school building, Chihaya Fukuyama looked at Asahi Sakura Kanji, who was sitting on the ground with a gloomy face. She was happy to see her only friend, but who knew that this guy would ask her to let someone else touch her but... Thinking of this, Chihaya glared at Su Shinxing, who was pretending to whistle. By the way he was whistling, and then reached out to pinch Asahi Sakurakanji's soft cheeks. You stupid girl, what did you learn this week? I just went to find Gadasama. Asahi Sakurakanji, who was trembling in fear, quickly broke free from Chihaya's hands and explained pitifully. The Gadasama you found is this Hawaiian beach pants addict? I'm wearing pants, oi. Sushinshin weakly retorted. Although the clothes weren't his own, that was all. Shut up, you idiot over there. I haven't settled the score with you for what happened this morning. It's not like I wanted to touch it. I'm not interested in the butt of girls over 14 years old except for legal lolas. Huh? It had to be said that the angry Chizeo's gloomy expression was extremely bold. She only used one word to make Sushinshin have a feeling of what a powerful Reiki, and he involuntarily stopped refuting. Only Jasmine's expression remained the same. She even had the spare time to eat the small refreshments that she had received from the young ladies at the tea party with relish. Actually, Gadasama came to Japan to protect you, Gadasama. Fortunately, Asahi Sakurakanji, who had been bathing in Chihaya's freezing aura all year round, was already immune to it. Even if he was scared to death, he could still speak. Protect me. Protect her. Chihaya Fukuyama and Sushinshin exclaimed in surprise. Yes, because Makanyama-sama hasn't become a modern human god yet, you're not enough of a deterrent to many high-level demons. You might be attacked by them, so before you truly become a modern human god, you need a real god who can guard the White Bell Shrine and the surrounding area to deter those demons and monsters. Asahi Sakurakanji explained in detail. According to what you said when you left Fusang for Gyeongjin, this ass. Alright, Miss Yamanaka, right? Please don't stare at me like that. Isn't this Miss Yamanaka also in danger? Sushinshin asked. That's right. That's why Yang Liao had sent Yang masters to secretly protect Makiyama-sama. Asahi Sakurakanji answered honestly. But I didn't feel anything. Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. He had been tailed for a whole week without noticing, and he didn't see any unfamiliar faces around him during this time. Of course, because that Yang master was already in the academy before I left for Huaxiao. Asahi Sakurakanji said admiringly, until now that Yang master hasn't shown any flaws. Chihaya Fukuyama thought for a moment, then suddenly asked Sakurakanji, the Yang master you're talking about, isn't it the transfer student who transferred to grade 1 some time ago? Makanyama-sama knows. Sakurakanji was shocked. Is there a need to be so surprised? Chihaya's eyebrows twitched. Even if it's me, I would know about the current situation of the academy, and I'm a member of the student council. Do you think I didn't see that strange resume? Makanyama-sama is unexpectedly smart. You only found out now? Although it wasn't appropriate for him to say it, but Chihaya felt that he could be considered as the smart type. Even if he didn't spend too much effort on his studies, as long as he completed his homework and did a certain amount of preparation and revision, his grades would be stable in the top 10, and he wouldn't be biased in any subjects. Other than the imperial concubine Gong Rueishi, who was so outstanding that it made people gasp in admiration, there weren't many people in Phoenix Academy who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her. This was also one of the reasons why she was able to become the Great Elder Sister. Phoenix Academy's Great Elder Sister was the existence of both wisdom and beauty. Just a pretty face alone was not enough to convince those young ladies. Even though they were in the same class, Asahi Sakurakanji didn't notice this at all. This dealt a blow to Chihaya's confidence. Speaking of which, I remember that Miss Emoli was originally in junior high school in Huaxia, right? The moment she came to Phoenix Academy, she immediately enrolled in senior high school. As expected, Miss Emoli is a smart person. As if sensing Chihaya Fukuyama's oppressive aura, Sakurakanji decided not to touch on this bad luck. Instead, he shifted the topic to Emoli, who was quietly eating her snacks like a hamster. Generally speaking, supernatural existences possessed learning and comprehension abilities that ordinary people couldn't hope to reach. Excellent grades and whatnot were the norm. Yes, generally speaking. No, the reason why Emoli enrolled in senior high school is because regardless of junior high school or senior high school, her grades are equally bad. Rather than wasting time in junior high school, she might as well transfer to Sakurakanji's class. Emoli puffed up her cheeks and didn't say a word. The one who helped her to reply was a nonchalant Sushinshin. Anyway, her status is now an exchange student. No matter how bad her grades are, the teachers won't be able to call her parents. Asahi Sakurakanji's face was filled with confusion. On the other hand, Chihaya cast a disdainful look at Su Shinshing. It's all because of you that Mo Li's grades are so bad. Mo Li, during this period of time in Fusong, don't follow this Hawaiian beach pants pervert around. Come stay at my house. I will definitely tutor you well. Not sure if it was because of the previous encounter with Mo Li that Chihaya had a good impression of her, so now she seemed to value Mo Li. Naive. Mo Li and I are of one mind. Do you think she will betray me? Su Shinshing snorted disdainfully with his nose. Later on there will be high-grade mutton soup for dessert. Tonight's dinner will be hamburgers and stewed beef with potatoes. After that there will be ice cream for dessert. Huff huff, don't tell me you think such a crude method of enticement will be effective. Let me tell you, crickets at this level. There's even a flower-shaped poached egg on top of the hamburgers. The sound of Mo Li suddenly standing up. The sound of Jasmine's small running steps. The sound of Mo Li suddenly turning around. Landlord, I will miss you. Mo Li stood behind Chihaya Fukuyama and waved at Su Shinshing. She actually betrayed me. Chapter 85. Hanakeyuan Yuan not motivated. Although she was around the same age as her classmates, as the eldest daughter of the Hanakeyuan family, one of the most orthodox Inyang Masters Earth Imperial Gate branch families, Hanakeyuan Yuan began learning Inyang Jutsu and how to control spirit-branded retainers from a very young age. She had fought against dangerous man-eating monsters and treated terrifying evil spirits and evil spirits. She had also investigated all kinds of urban legends and dealt with all the strange existences hiding behind them. In terms of the richness of life experience, not to mention those pure young ladies, even the senior teachers of Huanghua Academy could not compare to her. Other than the capital where the Inyang Hut headquarters was located, she could be considered as one of the top powers in the other branches. It was even normal for her to be the trump card when carrying out missions. But she did not expect that this time she would be the bodyguard of a female student, and it was for half a month. If it was not for the fact that the branch would contact her on time and provide her with some, including money, consumables, she would have suspected that she had been forgotten here. But at this moment she had to face an even bigger problem. Hey Yuan-chan, are you reading by yourself again? Is this book very interesting? The young lady named Little Vegetable asked curiously as she leaned in front of Yuan. It's normal. Yuan replied indifferently. The book in her hands was actually a copy of the Inyang technique incantation from her clan. But there was a special enchantment set up on it, so if ordinary people were to look at it, they would only be able to see the ordinary. What's your name? Kai will also read it in the future. Oh right, speaking of books, Yuan-chan, let me tell you, Kai recently read a very interesting shoujo manga. The male and female protagonists are so cute, and the story is also very exciting. If you want to read it, I can bring it to school. But you have to be careful not to be discovered by the teacher. Little Vegetable also likes that manga very much. Also be careful not to let senior Little Dog-chan see it. She seems to be in a bad mood recently. Just now when Little Vegetable passed by the student union office, she was throwing a tantrum. It's really scary. Wawa, speaking of which, Little Vegetable, I am here to look for the teachers. The other students are still waiting for me in the courtyard. Yuan-chan, wait for a while, I will chat with you later. The English teacher Ailuan found it. Wait a minute, Little Vegetable. After shooting out a bunch of words like a machine gun, the girl named Kai left with small steps like a typhoon, leaving behind only Yuan's messy soul. She closed the thick ancient book in her hand and stuffed it into her small leather bag expressionlessly. For example, this time when Chihaya Fukuyama entered the 800 Houses, Fuso's vegetable shop, to pick ingredients, Yuan quietly approached the blonde loli outside. But before she could do anything, the loli turned around and looked at Yuan, who was hiding behind a telephone pole. Her eyes were blank. Pervert. Since she had been discovered, she could only solve it as soon as possible. With this thought in mind, Yuan took out her spell book from her bag. Her slender index finger slid across the spine of the book and the book automatically opened. It was placed on one of the pages and floated in the air like a feather. Encircle. When will the bird in the cage fly out? The girl used her cold voice to sing the nursery rhyme, Caged Bird. Accompanied by her singing, black iron pillars suddenly stretched out from the shadows on the ground. 7 pillars surrounded Mo Lee from 7 different directions and were connected to each other at the top, forming a huge black birdcage-like cage. The tortoise and the white crane slipped. The person behind you. Who is it? The nursery rhyme continued. Mo Lee, who did not know what was going on, seemed to be pushed by an invisible hand and fell forward. At the same time, a hazy, thin black figure appeared behind the cage. It reached out its hands to the girl who was about to fall and tried to strangle her slender neck. I won't kill you, but please leave first, Yuan, who finished singing the nursery rhyme, silently said in her heart. Chapter 86. Although Japanese Inyan Jutsu originated from Taoist magic, it became a brand new Shinto system after merging with the teachings of other religions. Some techniques that were considered heretical in Taoist magic became part of the system of Inyan Jutsu. They were categorized and passed down from generation to generation. Henekiyuan Yuan was currently using one of these techniques. She used nursery rhymes that had been passed down for a long time as the medium of the spell, singing nursery rhymes as the ritual to cast the spell. Due to the nursery rhymes and the stories behind the nursery rhymes, it was very easy to construct the spell. It was a method that even beginners would know. However, Yuan's attainment in the field of spell was almost at the level of a master. Even these little tricks could be used in her hands. For example, the caged bird that she just used was originally a spell that could only be used to imprison the enemy. At most, it would cause the enemy to fall into a deep sleep. However, she used the summoning ritual of the newly discovered monster, the Slender Man, and incorporated it into the spell so that the spell could be used to kill the enemy. Although other Inyan masters could cause the Slender Man to bite them if they did not use the spell properly, it was more dangerous. By the way, since the Slender Man was given the meaning of killing children, this spell would cause extra damage to enemies with the body of a loli or a shota. As mentioned before, Henekiyuan Yuan's strength was one of the best among the modern Inyan masters. She was also very good at controlling her own spells. She did not intend to hurt Mo Lee. She only wanted to use the Slender Man's strength to knock him out and send him back. Then she would cast a spell on the fainted target so that she would be able to leave Chihaya Fukuyama on her own accord. However, at the moment when the skinny long ghost stretched his hand towards Jasmine, who seemed to have lost her balance, Jasmine went against her usual dazed and foolish appearance, and grabbed onto the skinny long ghost's slender arm at an extremely fast speed. Her strength was so great that the slender monster's arm was bent in an unnatural manner. Yao Yuan, who was standing at the side, even heard the sound of something breaking. The Slender Man let out a painful roar, but it was completely different from the roar of an ordinary creature. It was more like the sound of someone scratching a rusty steel plate. Several black tentacles stretched out from its back and wrapped around Mo Lee. However, Mo Lee only turned his head and scolded in dissatisfaction. Guwen. The slender ghostly figure's movements were completely frozen. Then its entire body turned gray and finally turned into gravel and disappeared into the cage. You really aren't an ordinary person, Hua Kaiyuan said coldly. She narrowed her eyes and waved her hand to summon the spell book that was floating in the air in front of her. She faced Mo Lee and waited. However, Mo Lee completely ignored her. He lifted his leg and kicked the black pillar in front of him. Cracks began to appear on the black pillar from the spot where she had kicked it. The cracks quickly spread to the other 6 pillars and they all shattered into pieces. It seemed like he had some kind of anti-demon physique. Yuan made a judgment about Mo Lee's performance in front of him. If that was the case, then spells were basically useless against him. Perhaps physical damage would be more effective. Several bright yellow paper talismans flew out of the spell book and spontaneously combusted, replenishing Yuan's spiritual energy for the next attack. Shikigami summon, half-step giant gate. Suddenly the sky darkened. Mo Lee subconsciously raised his head, but only saw a huge shadow coming towards him. Judging from the area of the shadow on the ground, the object falling from the sky was definitely not smaller than a luxurious villa. If someone with spirit vision were to look from midair, they would see a gigantic elephant leg appear out of thin air and stomp towards the ground. Giant Gate belonged to the 2nd star of the Big Dipper. It was also one of the 9 emperors. It controlled darkness and ruled right and wrong. There was no doubt that the Shikigami named after Giant Gate was the strongest among all the Shikigami. Even Yuan, who was known as a genius, couldn't completely summon it. However, this half-step giant gate stomp from the sky was enough to kill the majority of demons and monsters. This was also one of the 3 trump cards of Yuan, who was a first-rate and even an ace Yin-Yang master. She was forced to use this move right from the start, so it could be seen how much pressure Jasmine, who hadn't done anything, gave her. Seeing such a huge thing fall from the sky, even Emily was shocked. Although meteorite magic wasn't rare in another world, this was the first time the Demon King girl had seen something like stomp from the sky. If she still had her magical energy, she could use transfiguration magic to turn the elephant leg into a chicken leg. However, since her magical energy was sealed, there was only one way to fight back. Thus, Emily raised her little fist. The moment the half-step giant gate stomped down, the violent air current was like a level 12 typhoon that blew everything in the surroundings away. Some of the trees with shallow roots were uprooted and swept into the air. The small private cars were also blown around, and the glass windows that were closer to the landing point were all destroyed. After that, the ground also gave out a sound that couldn't bear the weight. A tremor that was comparable to an earthquake swept through the surrounding area. Even Su Xinxing, who was far away in Phoenix Academy, felt some tremors. Although Emily, who received this attack, was fine, the asphalt road under her feet couldn't withstand such a strong force. It caved in and formed a huge hole. Even Emily herself was trampled into the soil. In the next moment, the half-step giant gate's legs suddenly turned into white smoke, and with a bang, it disappeared. The vacuum caused by the disappearance of such a large object caused the surrounding air to surge in, forming a violent whirlwind belt above the pit. The power of the wind was not inferior to the gust of wind that was stirred up when the giant door was stepped down. Yuan, who was at the edge of the hole, felt her vision turn dark. She couldn't help but half kneel on the ground. At the same time, she felt a warm liquid flowing out from her nose. The half-step giant gate's disappearance wasn't because the summoning time was up or because she had returned it. It was because after that attack, the half-step giant gate had suffered such a heavy injury that it couldn't stay in this world anymore. The wail of the huge elephant was still reverberating in Yuan's mind. This kind of backlash from a failed summoning caused her to suffer a considerable amount of mental damage. If it wasn't for the fact that her mental strength was different from ordinary people, just that attack alone would have been enough to burn her brain. With such a thing happening, Chihaya, who was in the 800 rooms, naturally couldn't have not noticed anything. When the other customers thought that it was an earthquake and were hiding in the shop, she ignored the danger and ran out. In the end, she was shocked by the huge hole that took up the entire road in front of her. Luckily, this place was considered remote and there weren't many people around. Otherwise, just this one attack alone would have caused a lot of injuries or even death. Chapter 87. Hey. While Chihaya was staring blankly at the huge hole that suddenly appeared in front of her, Emily's voice came from the hole. Yuan had already seen through the smoke with her spell-enhanced vision. She found that Emily was trying to climb out of the hole with her hands and feet. Are you kidding me? She was hit directly by the half-step giant door, but she was still alive and kicking? Even the legendary Super S-level monsters would not be able to do that. Finally realizing that the enemy in front of her was not someone she could deal with alone, the girl gritted her teeth and waved her hand. A string of paper talismans flew out and turned into a flock of white pigeons. They flew towards Emily, who was still trying to climb up with her short arms and legs. Emily, oh no. She fell on her back at the bottom of the hole and hugged her small head, crying out in pain. At the same time, she tried to suppress her dizziness and ran to Chihaya Fukuyama, who was still in a daze. She grabbed her arm and said, "Hold on to me, we're leaving." What happened? Chihaya Fukuyama, who was just here to be a bystander, didn't even know what was going on before she was dragged away by Yuan. She sat on the enlarged spellbook and flew away. After that, Emily flew up from the bottom of the hole with a superhuman pose. She had an expression that said, "I haven't flown for so long that I almost forgot I have this ability." At this time, the sound of a police car could be heard not far away. Emily tilted her head and thought for 3 seconds before she made a decision. As usual, she would find the landlord if she couldn't solve the problem. Then she made herself invisible and flew in the direction of Su Xinxing's scent. On the other hand, Yuan, who had finally escaped from the crime scene, no mistake, fell from the sky with Chihaya Fukuyama, who was still in a daze. Fortunately, the two of them had already flown to the surface of the sea. Below them was the sparkling sea, so they didn't get a concussion. The spell book, made of an unknown material, did not return to its original size even after its owner fainted. It was still floating on the water like half a mattress, giving Chihaya a foothold after he fished Yuan out. Don't tell me it's going to be survival in the wild? Forgive me, I don't like that kind of plot. Chihaya Fukuyama grumbled as he used his backpack as a paddle to paddle the spell book boat. Speaking of which, it's already so late. Grandpa won't starve to death, will he? Fortunately, it didn't take long for Yuan to wake up. You're Flowery Academy's student Yuan, right? Chihaya stopped his futile attempts at using his backpack. He looked at the boy and said, based on the current situation, shouldn't you explain yourself? Yoshi pondered for a moment and felt that it would be too troublesome to explain, so he continued with his usual expressionless face and said in a monotonous voice, "Isn't this Chihaya Fukuyama-senpai? What a coincidence." "What coincidence? You're the one who said, 'Hold on to me, we're leaving now,' and then you carried me into the sea with a whoosh and fell into the sea with a splash. I was the one who fished you out. Chihaya Fukuyama-senpai knows how to swim? That's amazing. Don't use such a tone to tease a child. Do you think I'm an idiot?" "Of course not, I've always admired senpai." Flowery Academy's eyes drifted upward as he continued to read without any sincerity. "Liar. You're definitely lying. Can you say that again in front of my eyes?" "I really admire." We've reached the shore." "So you're lying." Thankfully, the two did not end up on an uninhabited island. Even though it was not a good place to reach the shore, the beach next to it was a popular tourist spot with plenty of tourists. If the two of them drifted there like this, they would definitely cause a commotion. "Flowery Academy, you're actually someone sent by the Yin-Yang faction to protect me, right?" Chihaya Fukuyama asked the Yin-Yang master girl, who didn't have much of a change in her expression as the two of them climbed up the dam and sat there waiting for the bus. The Yin-Yang master girl remained silent. "I've already learned the specifics from Asahi." This time the Yin-Yang master girl finally reacted. Chihaya could faintly hear her muttering something along the lines of, "That's why people who use witches as their profession are unreliable." It seemed that even in the world of theology, there was also competition between professions. "Actually, the god from Huaxia has already arrived, and the child who's following me seems to be that god's follower." Chihaya tried to explain the current situation to Flowery Academy as best he could. "Impossible. Senpai, you've definitely been deceived." Flowery Academy Yuan decisively denied it. Let alone a follower of a god, even among the gods, there weren't many who could fight against the Great Gate, who maintained their strength in the divine realm in the modern world and even win. On the contrary, there were quite a few monsters in Huaxia's mythology. Although monsters' cultivation would be affected by spiritual energy, most of the monsters used their own demonic energy in battle. Unless they were casting spells, they didn't have much spiritual energy requirements. And the blonde loli just now didn't cast any spells from beginning to end. In summary, it was more likely that she was a monster. But because it was too troublesome to explain, Flowery Academy Yuan decided to remain silent. Well, even if she was at the police station, she had the right to remain silent. "So, why do you all think I'm an idiot? Can't you just trust me?" Chihaya felt a little hurt. Although it was true that he was regarded as a perfect superwoman by his juniors and was given a lot of pressure by them, it was even more difficult for Chihaya to accept being treated as an idiot. "I really look forward to senpai." So the Onmyoji girl continued to speak like she was comforting a child. I've had enough of this kind of insincere words." Just when the two of them were quarreling, a cold feeling made them shiver at the same time. Flowering Garden Yuan immediately became alert. She had experienced this kind of cold feeling countless times. Every time she encountered an evil spirit or vengeful spirit. It was still daytime and it was only the beginning of autumn, but the two of them couldn't feel the warmth of the sun at all. It was as if everything was taken away by the black fog that appeared not far away. "I've been waiting for this opportunity. Finally, even the world is helping me and sent you to me." The black shadow made a strange hissing sound and approached the two of them. Flowery Academy Yuan subconsciously blocked in front of Chihaya Fukuyama. She wanted to use spells to repel the shadow, but when she used the spell she felt a pain in her head like needles. It seemed that the battle just now had completely exhausted her body. This is really bad. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to hold on for long before a flaw appeared in the chain of martial arts due to lack of physical strength. If the enemy had seized that opportunity to counterattack, it would have dealt extraordinary damage. It would have been normal for Faraway to lose his ability to move. Blossoming Courtyard Yuan would not sit still and wait for death. The best thing about physical arts was that it allowed one to quickly figure out the enemy's body structure. Just the combo just now had allowed the girl to see through the black mist and understand what kind of enemy she was facing. Its appearance was similar to an enlarged version of a centipede. Its body was nearly 5 meters long and it had an outer shell. It was extremely resistant to attacks and, cough, the girl suddenly pulled back and dodged the opponent's sudden tail whip. She jumped back 3 times in a row and barely escaped the opponent's attack range. After that, she knelt on the ground on one knee and vomited a mouthful of dark red blood. Part of the blood had faintly turned dark green. Is it poisonous? Perhaps the black mist that the enemy had spread out wasn't meant to hide its true appearance, but purely to deal with the poison gas in close combat. The opponent's body didn't have 4 limbs, so close combat was very disadvantageous for it. At this point, Blossoming Courtyard Yuan had more or less guessed the opponent's true identity. It was a member of the 100 Ghosts Nightwalker, a giant insect monster known as the 100 Feet. It was said that the largest member of this monster could even wrap around a mountain if it spread its body. Because the 100 Feet was a family of the earth spiders, it also had an extremely powerful curse defense like the earth spiders. In addition, it had the exoskeleton that most insect monsters had as well as its unique venom. For the current Yuan, it was undoubtedly a troublesome enemy. Blossoming Courtyard Yuan. Chihaya, who didn't know how to intervene, couldn't help but feel a little anxious when he saw the girl vomit blood. It's alright, don't worry. Blossoming Courtyard Yuan struggled to stand up, but her body looked a little wobbly. I'll buy you some time, Mayama-senpai, you run first. As long as you leave here, I'll naturally find a way to escape. She was lying. Chihaya, who had become very sensitive due to his past experience, immediately noticed the girl's lie. Perhaps this girl, who was a year younger than him, was already mentally prepared to die here. Why do you have to go to this extent? Chihaya couldn't understand. Blossoming Courtyard Yuan didn't answer, but instead took out a string of beads from somewhere and put it on her wrist. The Heavenly Lady of Lake Pipa, the ghost girl of Ao State's King of the Evil Road. Of my 4 souls, the fortunate soul is in front, the desolate soul is behind, the harmony soul is on the left, and the strange soul is on the right. I am eternally bound to the underworld wheel, willing to follow the orders of the Amaterasu great god and return here as the great god. I am Srigazan. The 3 beads on the beads were clearly different from the others. They were pale gold, and as the girl chanted, they turned into transparent glass beads. The golden halos inside the beads flowed out of the beads, turning into 3 swords of light with swastikas imprinted on them, floating around the girl. The girl's black hair also lost its color and turned snow white. Her eyes lost their focus and it was as if her consciousness had completely disappeared. This was Blossoming Courtyard Yuan's final trump card, Divine Bestowal. Using her 4 souls as the price, she asked the great god of Suzaku to descend and fulfill her wish. Just as this once-in-a-lifetime divine bestowal was about to be completed, a black sword mark suddenly appeared out of thin air and cut across Blossoming Courtyard Yuan's body. That was not a sword move but a phenomenon caused by the space being cut apart. For some reason, the moment this sword mark appeared, Suzuka Daming Kami, who was about to seize Hanyo Yuya's soul and possess her body, was like a mouse that saw a cat, and returned to Takuma Johara in an instant. Without the great god of Suzaku as the target of the prayer, the divine bestowal was naturally stopped. Blossoming Courtyard Yuan, who had all her strength drained, collapsed on the ground. She was at a loss as to what to do, together with Chihaya Fukuyama, looked at the black sword mark on Blossoming Courtyard Yuan's body. Because the black sword mark had cut open the space, it had caused the space to become chaotic for a short period of time. The power of the space had forcibly imprisoned the originally insufferably arrogant Debaizu, and it couldn't even move its tentacles. Then a voice came from the sword mark. Damn, I think I accidentally cut something. Emoli, are the space coordinates you gave me really okay? Chapter 89. Then a little girl's voice came from the sword mark. All rights to interpret this coordinate belong to me. What's this overbearing clause? You didn't say anything before. If I break something valuable, I won't have the money to pay for it. The first male voice said hurriedly. Then why don't you close this spatial rift quickly, Lord God? Why don't we pretend that we don't know anything and look around? Another female voice chimed in. However, Chihaya Fukuyama immediately recognized the owner of this voice. Sahi, is that you? She carefully asked Dabaizu, who was almost cut in half but was still frozen due to the spatial distortion. This voice, is it Mayama-sama? Asahi Sakurakanji's joyful voice came from behind the sword mark. Lord God, you're right, it's here. Well, if you really break something, we'll split it, the first male voice grumbled reluctantly. At this time, Chihaya also recognized the owner of the voice. If he was not mistaken, it should be the perverted idiot in beach pants from this morning. And the child's voice was undoubtedly Emoli. While Chihaya was guessing, another spatial rift appeared on Dabaizu's body. However, this time it was vertical and formed a cross with the previous one. At the same time, because of this, the middle point of the two sword marks expanded to a size large enough for people to pass through. Sushinshin Emoli and Asahi Sakurakanji all came out one by one. Although he did not know what was going on, it seemed like he was saved. Chihaya Fukuyama was only now relieved. After Sushinshin drilled through the spatial crack he had created, he hurriedly looked back to see what he had cut. In the end, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Why is this centipede making it look like he's from the crucifixion of Jesus? Only then did the two sword marks on Dabaizu's body disappear. At the same time, space was restored due to the world's self-recovery ability. Then the two huge cross-shaped wounds on Dabaizu's body spurted out green body fluids like fountains. As soon as the green pus with the smell of sulfur fell to the ground, white smoke rose into the air and left holes in the ground. Wow, is this a monster? Asahi Sakurakanji hid behind Sushinshin like a little quail. He carefully poked his head out and looked at the dying Dabaizu on the ground. I don't think so. When monsters fight, they use witchcraft or directly use their claws and teeth to attack physically. They won't spit out green things like blood to scare off their enemies. From the looks of it, it should be an endangered insect like the cobra that spits venom to defend against its enemies. Sushinshin pretended to know a lot. He touched his chin and speculated, it should be worth a lot of money if it's sold to the insect museum. No, how can there be such a big insect in the world? Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't help but complain. That's right. Centipedes are arthropods, not insects. That's not the point. Chapter 90. In the end, Asahi Sakurakanji asked Chihaya Fukuyama to preside over the ceremony for her. Then she used Kagura to treat Hanakeyuan's injuries. Since Chihaya Fukuyama's divinity was inclined toward water, and water also had the meaning of healing and the origin of life, even though Chihaya was not yet a god, the effect of his ceremony was no worse than Sushinshin's. Although Hanakeyuan was not completely healed, she at least regained her mobility. After watching Hanakeyuan leave, Asahi Sakurakanji stretched her back as if she had completed a great task. Great Lord God, you have successfully cured the monster in the well. From now on we don't have to worry anymore. I'm sorry to affect your good mood, but I still have to say that the monster didn't escape from the well. Sushinshin immediately poured cold water on Sakurakanji's enthusiasm. What? But didn't it attack Lord Yamanaka? Asahi Sakurakanji asked in confusion. Didn't you hear the monster's last words before it died? It attacked the butt. Ahem, the main reason it attacked Yamanaka was because Yamanaka had an incomplete divinity. As long as you get one of them, you will have the opportunity to become a god. In this era where spiritual energy is thin, if you want to become a more powerful existence as soon as possible, becoming a god is undoubtedly the easiest and most convenient way. Not to mention that Yamanaka has a divinity from Huaxiao, which is much more valuable than the one in Takamagara. Sushinshin explained casually, and there's one more thing that proves that the centipede is not the monster in the well. Nananani? Asahi Sakurakanji asked quickly. The monster's corpse is in the well. I'm afraid it died not long after it was sealed in the well. Eh? That monster is dead? Asahi Sakurakanji asked in disbelief with his eyes wide open. Most likely. But for supernatural creatures, death doesn't mean the end of life. Many supernatural creatures are able to exert more power after they break free from the shackles of their bodies. Su Xinxing continued to speculate. The monster in the well was able to break free from the seal so quickly and escape from the White Bell Shrine. In other words, our real enemy is a cunning spiritual creature. Wow, it sounds so troublesome. Asahi Sakurakanji could not help but feel a little discouraged. Chihaya Fukuyama, who was walking at the front, suddenly stopped and turned around. Spiritual creature, supernatural creature or monster, whatever it is. She looked at Su Xinxing and the others angrily. What do you mean by following me all the way back? Isn't that natural? Su Xinxing looked surprised. Of course I'm going home with you. Of course. I only invited Jasmine. Speaking of which, Mayama-sama has never invited me to her house before. Sakura Kobayashi Asahi hung her head dejectedly, looking very lost. Chihaya Fukuyama did not expect Asahi Sakurakanji to care so much, and could not help but feel a little flustered. That's because I am different at home and at school. Yo Miss Buttocks who likes the new and hates the old. Su Xinxing added. Shut up. Chihaya yelled at Su Xinxing with one hand on her waist. Then she scratched her face awkwardly and said to Asahi Sakurakanji, I can invite you, but maybe you will be disillusioned with me at school. It's okay. No matter what secrets you have, I don't mind. Even if you are a cute boy, I don't care. In that case, you and Mayama-sama can form an interesting couple. Chihaya-kun, I didn't expect you to be such a cute boy. No, stop. Mayama-sama, we can't do it. That Fujoshi over there, shut up. Hurry up and shut up, aren't you making me imagine? For the first time in his life, Su Xinxing hated his rich imagination. You don't have to do that. Sakurakanji covered his red face and followed behind Chihaya Fukuyama. You pervert over there, you are not allowed to follow me. Chihaya stuck her tongue out at Su Xinxing and left with Emoli, who was bored to death, and Sakurakanji, who smiled apologetically at Su Xinxing. In any case, I'm your savior. Su Xinxing stood alone on the street. For some reason, the Ballad of Little Cabbage, The Field is Yellow, 2 or 3 years old, no mother, floated to the side. Although it was nice to be able to hear the ballad of the Celestial Empire in a foreign land, there was a subtle sense of desolation. Dividing line. That's right, that's why I came here to freeload. Su Xinxing gave the girl a thumbs up and grinned. His teeth lit up like an anime. Get out. Hanakayama Yuyuan's dead fish eyes were half opened and ordered him to leave without hesitation. But then again, your place is really messy. Ignoring the owner's anger, Su Xinxing looked around. How should he put it? It was probably a tragedy that would only happen after an otaku who had no ability to live in the house for a whole year. Including the walkway, there were black garbage bags everywhere. Even the space to step on them was pitifully small. Although the garbage bags were covered with special charms to ensure that there would be no bugs, these charms were usually used to preserve the specialized organs of corpses or monsters. The smell alone made Su Xinxing, who was a housewife in a sense, frown. Clothes including bras and underwear were casually thrown on the sofa and bed. There were even some girls' underwear on the ground. The kitchen door was covered with sealing charms. Just by looking at it, it gave people the feeling that something indescribable was sealed inside. To be honest, Su Xinxing felt that even through the door he could feel something wriggling in the pool inside. Leftover noodles and snacks were randomly piled on the desk and coffee table. Next to them was a half-open spell book. Su Xinxing even saw stains of soup on the pages of the spell book. Beside the coffee table, there was a stack of spell books that were messily piled up. It was worth mentioning that there were many almond yellow paper charms hanging on the balcony, which was originally used to hang clothes to dry. I don't need you to care about my business. Hanakayama Yuan was still trying to be brave. Wait, your expression is so scary. Hey, what are you doing? Yee. Player Su Xinxing changed class from a god to a housewife. It's worth celebrating. It's worth celebrating. After the failure of the resistance, He had tasted the humiliation that was second only to the moment of the decline of the Blossom Courtyard family. Even though Yuan had developed the ability to not show her emotions during these years of missions, once she thought of the scene where she was forced to wash her underwear yesterday, she could not help but clench the pages in her hands. Oh, as expected, Yuan-chan's expression today is very strange, Site-size index finger pressed against her lips, revealing a naughty smile. Could it be that Yuan-chan is thinking about a man? You got it right? Little Vegetable had guessed correctly. As expected, as a transfer student, Yuan-chan must have liked a boy in her previous school, right? Quickly talk to Little Vegetable about him. How tall is he? Is he handsome? How are his grades? Is he from the sports club? Little Vegetable feels that boys are the most attractive when they are sweating on the playground. No. Although she was indeed thinking about a man, the content was all wrong. Blossom Courtyard Yuan, as usual, was trying to remain calm in the midst of Little Vegetable's machine gun-like chatter. In fact, if it were not for the fact that she could not even hear the class bell, Yuan would have wanted to set up a mute enchantment around her. Hey, don't be shy, Little Vegetable, let me tell you, Yuan-chan is so cute. If you were in a co-ed school, you would definitely be welcomed by many boys. By the way, did you confess to him? I have never been to a commoner school, so I am very interested in that kind of small place. Is there a legendary tree in the backyard of all commoner schools? As long as you confess under the tree, you will definitely succeed. By the way, the boy Yuan-chan likes wouldn't be from the baseball club, right? Going to Koshin together or something. Speaking of baseball, we are planning to play baseball in the afternoon's physical education lesson. Teacher Ailuan found out. Teacher, do you want to play baseball with us? Not far away, the blonde English teacher who had just started his job revealed an expression that something was wrong, but he still could not escape the fate of being pestered by Little Vegetable. He could only smile bitterly as he chatted with her while walking out of the classroom. This made Yuan, who had escaped from Little Vegetable's hell, heaved a sigh of relief. Just at this moment, a paper crane swayed as it flew in from outside the window. Yuan turned around to take a look and realized that the other students in the class did not seem to be paying attention to this side. She quietly caught it and opened it up, reverting it back to a letter paper and spread it on the page, roughly reading the words on it. This was a new mission from Enyang Liao, but the contents of the mission made her, who wanted to escape from Su Shinxing as soon as possible, disappointed. According to the letter, in a short period of time, in the city beside Huanghua Academy, which was to say the city where Chihaya Fukuyama's house was located, there would be a national traveling natural history exhibition organized by the capital's National Museum. There was even a legendary national treasure like Dijidori Yasutsuna in the exhibition. By the way, the reason why the Dijidori Yasutsuna was kept in the capital's National Museum and not in Enyang Liao's headquarters was because in this era, there was no one who could control it. If it was just a normal exhibition, it would be fine, but if someone wanted to take it for themselves, there was a high chance that the Dijidori Yasutsuna would turn into a demon blade and kill the wielder because of disagreement. The exhibition would last for about half a month. And Yuan's new mission was to protect the treasures in the exhibition during the period of the exhibition. Strange. Yuan narrowed her eyes, somewhat doubtful about this mission. It was not that the mission was too light, but on the contrary, to her, this mission was too heavy. Even as an exhibition, the Dijidori Yasutsuna was undoubtedly one of the strongest supernatural weapons in Japan. Based on Enyang Liao's style, it was impossible for them not to arrange for a few first-rate Enyang master teams to be in charge of this kind of exhibition. But this time, between the lines, there was a feeling that she was the only one in charge. After thinking for a while, she still had no idea, so she could only fold the letter and put it in her pocket. At the same time, she could not help but feel vexed. The place of residence had not changed, which meant that she still had to face that fellow for at least half a month. Chapter 92. Sai. Mizuki Takemiya was extremely melancholy. The reason naturally stemmed from yesterday's kidnapping case. Her father's indifference towards this matter was already within the young lady's expectations. If it was in the past, Mizuki Takemiya would probably be depressed for a period of time. But today she unexpectedly realized that she did not care about her father's opinion as much as she did in the past. What replaced it was the person who saved her. Yesterday, when the other party asked for the address, it was definitely Phoenix Academy. But after arriving at the academy, she had checked the name list of the academy's security guards. Because she didn't know their names, she mainly looked at the photos in the name list. Even the bodyguards of those young ladies were not spared. She checked them one by one but still could not find the person who saved her. That youth seemed to have disappeared into thin air and did not appear in front of her again. This naturally made the young lady who was experiencing love for the first time in her life feel extremely complicated. Even the negotiation that she had specially flown over yesterday to take a look at had fallen through because of this. Sister Feigong, are you feeling unwell? Just as Mizuki Takemiya was immersed in self-pity for not being able to find her Prince Charming, a young lady's voice jolted her back to reality. She looked towards the direction of the voice and discovered Wu Yejin, who was holding onto a craft paper document with her head tilted, looking at her with concern. Mizuki Takemiya knew a thing or two about this cute junior's thoughts. But the current her was also at a loss for her future, so naturally she was unable to give any promises. Good afternoon, 5 Hence she revealed her usual gentle smile and said to Wu Yejin in a gentle voice. I'm fine, just a little busy with work recently and a little tired. Really? Do you need me to inform the health teacher to let you sleep over there for a while? Viola Fiveleaf's expression became even more uneasy, and even her childish voice was tinged with a hint of concern. It's all right, I'll rest in the student council room for a while. Towards this junior who was so concerned about her, Mizuki Takemiya could not say anything else and could only reply with a bitter smile. And 5 you're the student council president, you have a lot of things to do, right? Don't waste your time here. Get back to work. How is this a waste of time? Wu Yejin's reaction was unexpectedly big. Even if I spent my whole life on Sister Feigong, it wouldn't be a waste. No, it's better to say that I'm prepared to do just that. Well, Wu Yi, I'm very touched by your intentions, but it's not good to delay the work of the student council because of this. Mizuki Takemiya had been with Wu Yejin for quite some time now, and it was not the first time she had experienced this kind of attitude. She had gradually gotten used to it and she skillfully changed the topic. By the way, what are you going to do now? I'm talking to the special admissions students whose grades have dropped recently to see if they have any difficulties. Wu Yi immediately followed Mizuki Takemiya's topic and said, after all, as special admissions students, their main condition is to have good grades. Special admissions students were those commoner students. Because they were admitted into Phoenix Academy, the school fees were much lower than the aristocratic ladies, and was only slightly more expensive than the average private high schools. Even if they were commoner families, they would still be able to afford it. Saying that, Wu Yejin flipped through the documents in the brown paper bag, and then nodded slightly. The rest of them basically have no problems, but there's one more. And student Asahi Sakurakanji can't be found. The other members of the student council also didn't seem to have seen her during the afternoon break. If it's Sakurakanji, she should be in the shrine on White Bell Mountain. If this matter isn't particularly urgent, I feel that it's better to wait till afternoon tea time before heading to her class to look for her. Sister Feigong, do you know that student Sakurakanji? Wu Yejin asked in surprise. And I've seen some information about her in the past. She's a witch from the shrine on White Bell Mountain, and can be considered as one of the original residents of this land, so she was specially admitted without taking the entrance exam. Saying that, Mizuki Takemiya seemed to have recalled something as he smiled slightly. And her witch costume is very beautiful. Oh. Since Sister Feigong said so, then I must go this time. Wu Yejin puffed up her cheeks in a fit of pique and bowed to Mizuki Takemiya. Then Sister Feigong, forgive me for taking my leave first. And do your best, 5 Leaf. Feigong smiled as she cheered Wu Yejin on. Leave it to me. The young lady straightened her body and saluted Mizuki Takemiya. Dividing line. Although she had confidently said those words in front of Mizuki Takemiya, but when they really started climbing the mountain, Wu Yejin realized that it wasn't as easy as she thought. Is White Bell Mountain that tall? After climbing for a while, she looked up and discovered that the mountain path was still as long as ever. Wu Yejin, who was sweating profusely and panting heavily, felt an urge to shrink back. Don't tell me that lunch break will already be over by the time I reach the top? No, with these distracting thoughts, it'll be even more difficult to climb back up. Wu Yejin shook her head. Just as she was about to continue climbing, the bushes on the side of the road suddenly trembled, as if something had drilled its way through them, giving her quite a fright. It's clearly daytime. The vegetation on White Bell Mountain was quite dense, and the towering canopies blocked almost all the sunlight, making it a little dark. Moreover, there were many small wild animals. Apart from the animals that often drilled around the mountain path, there were also all sorts of strange noises coming from the depths of the forest. If one wasn't used to walking on the mountain path, it would be quite scary to walk on the mountain path alone. Wu Yejin, who was almost scared to tears, trembled all over. She stiffly turned her head to the front of the mountain path, and then ran up the mountain as fast as she could. Don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. She didn't know how long she had been running, but she suddenly discovered that the stairs leading to the mountain path had disappeared, and the shrine that wasn't that great, but was still considered normal, appeared in front of her. However, there weren't many people on the square between the shrine and Tori. It seemed that Sakura-kanji-san was either in the shrine or behind it. Wu Yejin caught her breath and then quickly ran through the shrine. As expected, just as she was about to reach the back of the shrine, she heard someone talking. She looked over and then she was completely stunned. The person who was talking was a man. And the person who was talking to that man was another big sister of Phoenix Academy, Chihaya Fukuyama. Asahi Sakura-kanji, who was the purpose of Wu Yejin's trip, and the transfer student Mo Lee, who had just transferred to Phoenix Academy yesterday, were sitting in the corridor behind the shrine, watching the man and Chihaya Fukuyama talk. Because there was a distance between them, Wu Yejin couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but she could vaguely hear words like almost, let me, your butt, pull it out. Wu Yejin felt the temperature on her face rising rapidly, and she reckoned that her face was now extremely red. She tried her best to suppress the words that almost escaped her mouth, and didn't allow herself to scream out loud. It's not a pure heterosexual relationship, ah 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 ah. Chapter 93. Wu Yejin felt that this wasn't the right time for her to show her face, so she quickly left the Shiranui shrine. On the mountain road, the girl's mind kept replaying the words she just heard. No, I didn't think that Chihaya Fukuyama-senpai, who looked so cold, would be so bold and unrestrained. That was in the wild, right? Furthermore, there were two other students. Wait, could this be the legendary 4P? And there was also Sakura-kanji dressed as a witch. Was this cosplay? Then Mo Lee, who had a childlike body, should be a lolicon? That lolicon's attributes were surprisingly complete. The strange knowledge she had learned from the erotic romance novels she had not received from the other young ladies made Viola's face turn even redder. Meow. Due to the wild thoughts in her mind, the five-leaf pansy didn't notice that she missed a step and slipped off the mountain road. After rolling twice, she screamed and slid down the hillside covered with dead branches and rotten leaves. Finally, she fell from a small depression and fell on a pile of dead leaves that exuded the smell of mud. Although she was dizzy from the fall, she miraculously didn't suffer any injuries. Only her uniform was a little dirty and her hair was a little messy. Ouch, ouch, ouch. I was scared to death. Standing up from the pile of dead leaves, Wu Yejin patted off the dead leaves on her skirt. While wiping her tears, she looked around and found that she wasn't far from the foot of the mountain. The file is still here. It's great that I didn't lose it. The girl picked up the file from the ground and held it in her arms. She wobbled away from the pile of dead leaves and planned to go back to the school through the forest. But after a few steps she found that not far away there was a snow-white cat. Because she never had a pet, Wu Yejin wasn't familiar with cats, but the cat's appearance was a little strange. Rather than calling it a cat, it was more like an animal that was a cross between a cat, a dog, and a mink. It was smaller in size and it wasn't as thin and long as a mink. It was more like a cat. But the most important thing was not the cat's appearance or breed, but its current state. Wow, she's seriously injured. We have to send her to the veterinary hospital as soon as possible. The kitten was lying in a patch of grass. Its snow-white fur was mostly dyed red by dark red blood. Even the grass under its body was dripping with blood. Because the blood had already scabbed, its fur had also become tufts of hair. In addition, there was a huge wound from its chest to its abdomen that was so deep that its bones could be seen. Looked very miserable. Wu Yejin thought for a moment, then rolled up the craft paper bag and put it under her armpit. She took off the small red checkered vest over her school uniform and gently wrapped it around the injured kitten. She held it in her arms and carefully walked down the mountain. In a sense, he was really unlucky. Because his figure is similar to mine, the other security guards are too burly. Su Shinxing sighed helplessly. And that guard Xiushi is also a handsome young man. When Lord God took off his clothes, he was especially pleasing to the eye. Sakura Xiao Lu, who was at the side, interjected excitedly. It made my maiden heart sprout. To be honest, I don't think that's a young girl's heart. Su Shinxing wanted to say something, but he felt that if he said something he would lose. In the end, he silently returned to the shrine and changed back into his own clothes. What is Goddess-sama going to do next? Sakura Kanji helped Su Shinxing pick up the security uniforms scattered on the ground and asked him at the same time. The next thing should be to open the seal in the kitchen. Su Shinxing recalled the messy state of Hanakane's home, touched his chin and said seriously. What are you fighting against? Chihaya Fukuyama, who had already arrived at Tori ahead of them, casually complained. Mo Li secretly stuffed the unfinished shellfish into Su Shinxing's pants pocket. Chapter 94. When Su Shinxing returned to his lodgings, blossoming courtyard Yuan was naturally not at home. After all, it was still class time in Phoenix Academy. Summoning his spirit ghosts to pass through the door and after opening the door from the inside, Su Shinxing then slowly entered the house. Although compared to yesterday's horrifying scene, after Su Shinxing's torment in the middle of the night, the house had already become much better. It was probably to the extent of being slightly messy, and even if he opened the windows he wouldn't need to worry about a large number of flies invading. But this tranquility was only on the surface. The real horror has yet to begin. Su Shinxing took a deep breath as he and the other spirit ghosts looked at the door, which had been sealed till now as though they were facing a great enemy. The frosted glass had isolated the world behind the sliding door, but he could faintly catch a glimpse of some wriggling ominous things. The kitchen was always a place where soldiers would fight for when they were cleaning. After mentally preparing himself, he ignored the talismans on the sliding door and pulled open that forbidden door. In an instant, a foul stench that could be seen with the naked eye gushed out from the kitchen like a flood. The stench of rotting meat mixed with the smell of rotten fruits and vegetables, the lush green scene in the sink which had to be mosaicked before it could be shown on the screen, and the bento boxes which had overflowed from the rubbish bin, most of them were pasted with half-price stickers and laurel crowns, were all telling how terrifying this small room was. Even the spirit ghosts who had their noses cut off before they died, which resulted in them having almost no sense of smell after death, subconsciously covered their noses and mouths when they saw this horrible scene. And Su Shinxing, who bore the brunt of that foul stench for the first time, had the illusion that his cloud scale was on the verge of collapsing. Not knowing if it was a psychological effect, he somehow felt that the kitchen seemed to be filled with a light green fog, just like the green miasma which filled the Death Swamp when he passed through Syra Swamp that year. The only difference was that the Death Swamp at least had dead swamp fishmen, wild-toothed giant crocodiles and other creatures which were immune to the poison of the miasma. But there was not a single living thing in this room. Su Shinxing even found the corpses of cockroaches in the mysterious black liquid in some lunchboxes. Even cockroaches that had lived on Earth since the Devonian period and had a longer history than the dinosaurs and were able to adapt to all kinds of harsh environments had no choice but to die here. Su Shinxing began to have difficulty breathing. Of course, it was just an illusion. He had been able to survive in an oxygen-free environment for a long time. This is not good. If this mysterious poisonous gas is released, it might cause a disaster even greater than the mustard gas. Looking at the hazy green mist slowly drifting from the kitchen to the living room, Su Shinxing suddenly came back to his senses. What he didn't know was that when this mysterious gas spread out from the kitchen, the animals in the surrounding area also showed signs of abnormality. The dogs began to bark madly. Some of them were crazily crawling on the ground. Even more of them were running around madly. The cats were slightly more elegant. They just showed a sense of uneasiness. Many cats abandoned their poop pickers and ran up to the trees with their kittens in their mouths. The birds seemed to be frightened by something. They began to hover in the sky but no longer landed on the ground. The ants began to move and even the cockroaches crawled out from every corner, scaring many people. Some experienced old people suddenly turned pale. Their fingers trembled as they pointed to the sea where countless fish jumped out of the water and said in shock, This is the sign of a natural disaster. Even the investigators of Enyang Liao noticed this unusual situation and couldn't help but nervously ask for help from the headquarters. Su Xinxing, the initiator of all this, was unaware. He just stuck the talismans he got from Xingyan Ameng around the kitchen door, barely stopping the spread of the stench. However, under the influence of the stench, the talismans began to wither not long after. He didn't know how long they could last. Before the talismans are destroyed, the kitchen must be cleaned up successfully. The sense of urgency that Su Xinxing missed hit him. Ever since he raced against time to defeat the Demon King before the Demon King's army completely destroyed the Demon King's army, he hadn't experienced such a sense of urgency for a long time. Little air, throw all the bento boxes into the garbage bag and throw them away. Little C, I'll leave the sink to you. Little Wu, wipe the kitchen counter. Su Xinxing skillfully assigned the tasks. By the way, little E, little air, little San, little C, little Wu and little Wu were the names that Su Xinxing gave the spirit ghosts. However, this guy was a little lazy. He just named them according to the age of the little guys when they were alive, and then gave them a homophonic name of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The spirit ghosts could only carry out Su Xinxing's instructions with bitter faces. Su Xinxing began to clean the kitchen counter. Although it hadn't been used much, the mold that had spread from the sink had almost taken over the place. It looked green and rather creepy. With the efforts of the crowd spirit, the kitchen gradually returned to its original appearance. When Blossom Courtyard returned home, she opened the door and saw such a bustling scene. She froze at the door for a moment. The young girl planned to pretend that she didn't see anything and retreated outside to pass the time. However, before she could escape, she was caught red-handed by Su Xinxing, who was waiting for her. Don't run. Go and throw away all the garbage bags at the door. I've already put up the recyclable and non-recyclable labels. Don't throw them away wrongly. Where did this old woman come from? Yuan rolled her eyes and put the book in her hand on the shoe cabinet at the entrance. Then she grabbed the garbage bag at the door with both hands and lifted it up. As a result, the weight of the garbage bag exceeded her expectations. The young girl staggered and bumped into the shoe cabinet. The book fell to the ground and the letter inside also fluttered down like a feather. Before she could react, the spirit ghost next to her cleverly caught the letter and respectfully presented it to Su Xinxing, who was wearing rubber gloves. Hua. New mission. To be a bodyguard for the museum's exhibition? Su Xinxing looked at the words on the letter and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He revealed a very dangerous smile in Yu Yuan's eyes. This guy just had to see it. The young girl couldn't help but curse her bad luck in her heart. Let me see. If there's time, shouldn't the exhibition start today? It just so happens that the house is almost cleaned up. Let's go take a look at the exhibition. I'll have to trouble you to pay for my ticket. How thick-skinned is this guy? Chapter 95. The location of the exhibition was the public museum in the city. Originally, it was just a small place without many people, but the gimmick of the national treasure was quite powerful. When Su Xinxing and the others arrived, there was already a sea of people. By the way, is it really okay for you to come so late? While being pushed around in the crowd, Su Xinxing asked Hanakeyuan Yuan, who was next to him, I think in such a chaotic situation, things are most likely to be stolen, right? Perhaps for ordinary people, in public meant that they had no chance to steal. However, Su Xinxing had experienced so many supernatural events that he had long known that ordinary people's common sense was useless against supernatural beings. Putting everything else aside, Su Xinxing alone had at least 3 ways to take away the exhibits in front of everyone. There's a Shikigami here, it's okay. Hanakeyuan Yuyuan's face was expressionless as she muttered in a voice that was difficult to hear clearly in the crowd. In fact, she had long planned to take advantage of the chaos to get rid of Su Xinxing. However, for some reason, even if she escaped by moving around in the crowd and using other people to block Su Xinxing's sight, after a while, Su Xinxing would be pushed to her side by the crowd again. After several failed attempts to escape, The girl seemed to have accepted her fate and was pushed around by the crowd with Su Shenxing as if she had accepted her fate. After lining up for a while, the 2 people plus 6 spirit ghosts finally bought tickets and successfully entered the museum. By the way, you are the security guard of the exhibition. Don't you have a work permit or something to let us in directly? The people in the museum finally seemed to be less than outside and they could move freely. Su Shenxing wiped the sweat on his head and took the time to ask. No, the girl answered crisply. After all, Yang Liao was not an organization that could be put on the table. In the secular world, an exhibition of this scale naturally had special security companies and self-defense forces to protect it. If Yang Liao sent a team of several first-line Yang masters, they could still use conventional means to disguise themselves as ordinary security guards. They usually did. However, there was no way to fool a guy like Hanakeyuan Yuan, who was obviously underage, so they could only try their best to protect her as an amateur. This was also one of the reasons why Yuan felt that this mission was somewhat strange. Oh, there's even a Kappa's corpse. Is this real? Not long after, Su Shenxing began to wander around, looking at the various exhibits of the exhibition with great interest. The Kappa mummy from the Rulongji Temple in Osaka. It's real. As an industry insider, Blossom Courtyard Yuan naturally dabbled in some strange things. But it was precisely because of this that she felt even more strange. The monks of Ruelong Temple should have prohibited visitors from seeing the Kappa mummy. Yet they had displayed it in this exhibition. It was just like how the Kyoto Public Museum would display the national treasure, Tokugawa Yasutsuna. It was too abnormal. Not only that, but in this exhibition hall alone, the girl could recognize 7 or 8 products from the inner world. In addition to the Kappa mummy and the Osaka Rulongji's collection of the mermaid corpse, there is also the Onamaru Kakazuna that should have been hidden in the inner hall of the Fusang Palace. For an exhibition, this number was too abnormal. It should be known that even in that kind of large museum, there were often only 1 or 2 items related to supernatural existence or power in a hall. Suddenly, Su Shenxing hugged Blossom Courtyard Yuan intimately like a couple, startling the girl who was still immersed in her own thoughts. This guy didn't have any breath, and she accidentally forgot that he was still by her side. Just as the girl was about to struggle up, Su Shenxing whispered in her ear, "There's a strange guy watching from the right rear." Yuan was startled and quietly connected to the vision of the Shikigami she left in the exhibition hall. Sure enough, she saw a strange person in the direction Su Shenxing pointed out. The other party should be a man. It was summer, but the man was wearing long sleeves and knee-length jeans. He even had a cap on his head. Rather than saying that his face was expressionless, it was more accurate to say that he was wearing an expressionless human skin mask. His hands were hanging low, and the few exposed skin had a strange bulging feeling, as if he was wearing clothes that were 1 size smaller. As if aware that he had been discovered, the other party lowered his cap and limped away. The other party's action was exactly what they wanted, and the 2 hurriedly followed. After all, there were too many people in the museum. Even if Su Shenxing wanted to make a move, he had to estimate the degree of impact it would cause. As for the premise of making a move at the beginning, the reason was very simple. Su Shenxing was the kind of person who liked to use his hands more than his brain. In his words, as long as he added the word physical behind the action, he could almost solve most of the situations. And he had been using his own actions to explain this sentence. In a sense, Blossom Courtyard Yuan was the same kind of person as Su Shenxing. Although she always quietly read books at school and acted like a literary girl, in fact she preferred to make a move instead of shooting her mouth off. This could be seen from the fact that she didn't know Mo Li's strength and background before making a move against the devil Loli. As a result, she was almost beaten to the ground by Mo Li. However, when the 2 chased out of the museum, they found that the sea of people outside blocked their vision. Even if they continued to track with the help of the ghost spirit and the spirit Shikigami, they still lost track of that person when they came to the main road outside. It was as if the other party had suddenly disappeared. What do you think? Su Shenxing walked to the side of the road, looked to the side and asked with a frown. Very suspicious. Blossom Courtyard Yuan answered concisely. Rather than saying very suspicious, it was better to say that the suspicious aura was off the charts, okay? That guy was as obvious as the insect in Men in Black 1. From the outside he kept emitting an aura that said, "Come and check on me, I'm actually not human." If it was cis, Even if the police there directly shot him and said that this guy was threatening them, they would be acquitted without going to court. No, I'm asking you how you like to eat this for dinner. Su Shinxing pointed to the long stick-like object in front of him that was full of small lumps and exuded a strange smell. It's for clearing heat and detoxifying? I refuse. Yuan changed back to her previous expressionless face and answered without hesitation. Also, please don't look at Bittergourd with an ulterior motive, thank you. I'm telling you, only people whose brains are full of filthy things will think that everything they see is filthy. Wait, I'm joking, don't go, I don't know the way, don't leave me. Chapter 96. Although they successfully found a suspicious person last night, in a sense, the mission had a certain degree of breakthrough, but Hanakeyuan Yuan was not happy at all. Any girl who woke up in the morning and saw an uncle with a face full of stubble picking up her underwear would not be happy, right? Listen to me, in fact, everything originated from a beautiful misunderstanding, Su Shinxing carefully explained while scooping rice. The low pressure that lingered around the girl's body made him a little scared. After all, this matter was indeed his fault. He was muddle-headed from his sleep in the morning and thought that he was in Sakura Apartments. He subconsciously helped Jasmine pack her clothes as usual. As a result, he was awakened by a scream that almost broke his eardrum. Then Yuan became like this. I am allergic to perverts. Please stay more than 20 meters away from me, thank you. Then I can only sit on the balcony. Hearing Su Shinxing's words, Yuan thought for a moment, then stood up, walked a few steps to the balcony and sat down again. You don't even let me sit on the balcony. Su Shinxing shed tears of regret for his hand in the morning. Breakfast was dry roasted bamboo fish, miso soup and rice. Although it was not the same as the breakfast habits of the Chinese people, for Su Shinxing, who usually had difficulty even eating porridge for breakfast, to be able to eat rice in the morning was already something to be grateful for. By the way, although he was allergic to seafood, he would only have a reaction when eating sea urchins, abalone and so on. Ordinary sea fish were not a problem. As for those allergens, with his current financial situation, it would be very difficult to come into contact with them in this lifetime. Do you want natto? Su Shinxing took out a small box and asked the girl. The girl did not answer, she just quietly ate her breakfast, obviously still angry. There's rice on the side of your mouth? Su Shinxing put down the natto box, pointed to the corner of his mouth and signaled to the girl. Yuan stuck the rice in her mouth with her finger, still did not speak to him. How was the breakfast? Su Shinxing continued to ask, not discouraged. Although he had never made bamboo fish miso soup before, it was basically the same as cooking. For people who were more familiar with this aspect, they could make a home-cooked delicacy with just a little bit of practice as long as they got used to it. It was delicious. After a long while, the young girl muttered unwillingly. Compared to the past where they either skipped breakfast or bought rice balls from the convenience store on the road, today's breakfast was indeed very delicious. Most importantly, it was the homely taste that was hard to find in a family restaurant. Ever since the decline of the Hua Kaiyuan family, she had hardly tasted this kind of flavor. Therefore Su Shinxing showed a happy smile. I still haven't forgiven you. The girl looked at his smiling face and gritted her teeth. Okay, does our security lady need more food? Another bowl. The breakfast time of Hua Kaiyuan's temporary family passed peacefully. Dividing line. Although there was a new mission, but the original instruction to go to Huanghua Academy had not been lifted, so Yuan still had to go to school on time. During lunch break, she also appeared at the back of the White Bell Shrine and became part of Su Shinxing's group. Hua Kaiyuan classmate is also here. Chihaya Fukuyama did not know why, but in front of Hua Kaiyuan, he felt that his hands and feet were tied. I just want to find a quiet place to eat my lunch. Taking out the lunch prepared by Su Shinxing, the young girl clasped her hands together and softly said, I'm starting to eat, and opened the lunch box. The dishes were not particularly luxurious and the color could even be said to be a little plain. But the combination of meat and vegetables was great, and with the addition of Japanese-style omelette as embellishments, this handmade lunch could be considered to be very good. But before Yuan started eating, she found that Emily had put down the scallops, thin salt-flavored, in his hands and was drooling while staring at her lunchbox. Octopus sausage, do you want to eat? Yuan used her chopsticks to pick up a Vienna sausage carved into the shape of an octopus and asked softly. Emily hurriedly nodded his head and then took a bite of the sausage on his chopsticks and chewed with a blissful expression. She didn't know why, but Yuan, who had suffered a huge loss the day before yesterday, was clearly still a little afraid of Jasmine until this morning. But now she didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. She only felt that the way Jasmine ate was very cute. By the way, Chihaya had also prepared a lunchbox for Emily, but Emily had secretly eaten the entire lunchbox in the morning during class. Sorry to disturb you. Asahi Sakurakanji came over and took out a thermos flask. I brought some wheat tea here. Hua Kaiyuan classmate, do you want some? If it was any other time, Yuan felt that she would definitely reject, but now she couldn't help but nod her head and then received the cup of wheat tea, which was placed in a disposable paper cup, and took a light sip. It's delicious. Hua Kaiyuan classmate, I'm glad you like it. Asahi Sakurakanji replied to Yuan with a feminine smile. Too bad she's a fujoshi. Su Shinxing, who was watching not far away, sighed in his heart. What did you do to Hua Kaiyuan? Why do I feel like she's completely different from yesterday? Until now, Qian Zhao, who was still trying to control the divine position with the help of Su Shinxing, sat side by side with him. She couldn't help but ask as she opened her lunchbox. Mimi, oh, Su Shinxing winked at him. Oh, is that so? Qian Zhao, who felt fine no matter what, replied without a care in the world and began to eat her lunchbox. You gave up too quickly. Why don't you ask me more questions? My heart hurts so much. Su Shinxing, who was ignored, immediately twisted his body and kept whispering in Qian Zhao's ear like a fly. Chihaya showed a wow, this guy is so troublesome expression and finally sighed helplessly. Then what happened? Huff huff, listen to me, actually Hua Kaiyuan girl has already bowed down to my Hawaiian beach pants. Puff. Before Su Shinxing could finish his words, the lid of the lunchbox flew over and hit him on the ground. Although it didn't break his defense, he still pretended to be in pain and stretched out a trembling hand towards the sky with an "I have no regrets in my life" expression. Why can't you be more serious? Is it fun to be like this all the time? Chihaya couldn't help but sigh again. Super fun. Su Shinxing replied energetically. This guy is hopeless. At this moment, Chihaya Fukuyama and Hua Kaiyuan's thoughts were synchronized. Chapter 97. The Yin-Yang Shirtao was a supernatural monitoring organization that had been passed down from the Heian era. It was undoubtedly the highest authority in the inner world of Fuso. Unlike Huaxia, which cultivated the new generation of practitioners through sex, Fuso emphasized on the theory of bloodline. Most practitioners were descendants of the Yin-Yang master family. These people generally had innate spiritual power in their bodies. They were much faster than the practitioners of Huaxia who practiced in the winter and summer. However, this kind of accelerated cultivation method that only knew how to tap into the potential of the bloodline also limited the development of the practitioners of Fuso. Since the beginning of the Heian era, the only famous Yin-Yang master in Fuso was Abe Saimai. However, it was precisely because of this that the Yin-Yang Shirtao was able to categorize the Yin-Yang Shirtao as a discipline system. It used the most simple and easy-to-understand method to cultivate groups of practitioners like modern schools. In terms of low-level practitioners, the number of Yin-Yang masters in Fuso even exceeded that of Huaxia, which mainly recruited practitioners from sections. Of course, in terms of high-end combat power, the mainland was still superior. At this time, in the headquarters of the Yin-Yang Shirtao located in the capital, a man wearing a patterned feather cloak was walking down a wooden corridor with a gloomy expression. The other Yin-Yang masters who passed by did not dare to provoke him. They all lowered their heads and avoided the violent master of the Yin-Yang Shirtao. Finally, he came to the office where Dr. Quan of the Yin-Yang Shirtao was. Excuse me. His deep voice and indescribable gloominess were enough to make the other Yin-Yang masters worry about the safety of their superior in the office. As soon as the man opened the paper door, a young man wearing a black and white hunting suit narrowed his fox-like eyes. He held a bat fan in his hand and showed an uncomfortable fake smile. Oh, isn't this the ace of the Yin-Yang Shirtao, Lord Minamoto Shirtao? I remember that you should be attending the religious conference in the Vatican as a representative of Fuso Shinto. Why are you here? I'm afraid that if I continue to stay in the Vatican, you'll give away Fuso's national treasures one by one to those demons and monsters. In the face of the young man's fake smile, Minamoto Shurgen seemed to be used to it as he mocked without batting an eyelid. I heard that the group of trash guarding the god on Rock Palace even lost Mikazuki Minakika and Futo Mitama? Minami-kun, your information is outdated. Tsunetsugu Juzumaru from Honshoji Temple and Tingyun from Rita Shrine have also been stolen. The Maeda Yatakukai has also recently discovered traces of an unknown person's invasion. I estimate that the target is the Emperor of Named Object Ceremony. Facing the Emperor's accusation, everyone in the shoujo is panicking. So you let people throw the remaining Onamaru Kokatsuna and Dijidori Yasutsuna of the 5 swords of the world to that small county, and also sent those useless people to guard it and let people steal it. Because no matter what, I can't use the remaining heavenly feather slash as bait. His Majesty will kill me. The Maeda Yatakukai was also scared and refused to take out the Emperor of Named Object Ceremony as bait. The fox-eyed young man didn't seem to hear the sarcasm in Minamoto Shurgen's words. Instead, he used the bat fan to support his chin and said with a smile, "And that thief is much more cunning than I imagined. If there are too many guards, they won't be able to find its trace at all." In fact, this was also the case. The heavily guarded god on Rock Palace and Rita Shrine had their treasures stolen without anyone noticing. On the contrary, the Maeda Yatakukai, which was not so heavily guarded, noticed the traces before the other party took action. It was precisely because of this that the highest Inyang head of the Inyang Shoujo would take the risk of throwing Dijidori Yasutsuna and Onamaru Kokatsuna as bait. And it's not like I didn't consider anything except for some necessary backup plans. Seeing the unhappy look on Minamoto Shurgen's face, he continued, "This time I entrusted it to the orphan of the Hanaquin family. That little brat with impure blood. I don't think a guy like her can stop a thief that even a first-class Inyang master can't detect." At the mention of the name Hanaquin, Minamoto Shurgen's eyes were full of contempt. It's better to say that as long as she doesn't betray us humans like her dead father, it's good enough. You actually trusted that little brat. When did you become so soft-hearted, Tsuchimikado Motoki? Don't say that, Yuyuo-kun. Let's not talk about the development of Yuyuo-kun for the time being. Both men and women in Japan can use the honorific title of kun. Is very hardworking. In terms of performance, maybe even you, the ace, can't compare to her. Known as Tsuchimikado Motoki, the current head of the Tsuchimikado family smiled slightly. In order to revive the Hanaquin family, she is working very hard. I hope so. Minamoto Shurgen turned around and walked out of the door. Is Yuyuo-kun also planning to go to the White Bell County? Tsuchimikado Motoki put away his bat fan, looked at the burly figure that could almost cover half of the paper door and asked loudly, "Of course, isn't it? Unlike an old fox like you, I can't just leave that little brat there. I can't be at ease. If that's the case, then send my regards to the head of the imperial concubine family. You will also be heading to Hackering City in the next few days. Oh, right, as compensation I'll give you a little advice." Tsuchimikado Motoki didn't mind the disrespect in the other's words, and just continued with a smile. "Absolutely do not provoke the god of that place. A god that descended to the human world in this era." Minamoto Shurgen snorted lightly. Although he didn't finish his words, everyone could hear the disdain in his voice. Then without any reluctance he slammed the door shut and quickly left the place. Only Tsuchimikado Motoki was left in the room. The smile on the face of the current Inyang head of the Inyang Liao gradually faded, and it was replaced by a thoughtful expression. It's common sense that the power of the gods of this era would be weakened in this world, but if we believe in common sense too much, we will only be digging our own graves in the inner world we live in. Even Tsuchimikado Motoki couldn't figure out the true strength of the god that came from the other side of the strait. The report from Huaxia's super administrator's office only recorded a few words of no practical significance. Apart from the fact that the god was considered an Einherjar, there wasn't even a complete name of the god. The god's behavior in Hackering City could be said to be mysterious. In just half a day, the Inyang masters in Hackering City who were tasked with monitoring the god had all lost contact. It wasn't until the next day that they were discovered naked in front of the police station in the neighboring city, wearing nothing but boxers. By the way, although their wallets were still there, all the cash in them had disappeared. Because of this, They didn't even obtain first-hand information about the battle that happened in Hackering City a few days ago. Most of the information that was presented was obtained by sending people to investigate and restore the scene of the incident. Currently, the only Inyang master who could normally come into contact with the god was the little guy from Hanakia. In this incident, Tsuchimikado Motoki didn't place high hopes on Hanakia, but rather the god from Huaxia. Please, don't let me down. Chapter 98. Sushinshin sneezed. So dirty. Chihaya Fukuyama immediately held his lunchbox and distanced himself from him. The god training had been going on for 3 consecutive days. Under Sushinshin's training, Chihaya Fukuyama could actually sense the divine power in his blood. This was a situation that even Sushinshin himself did not expect. After all, this guy's divine position was not complete, and the training methods were all made up by him. You actually despise your own master for being dirty. Do you know that your master's heart hurts? Sushinshin carelessly wiped his nose and ordered Chihaya Fukuyama. The girl completely ignored his accusation and quickly finished her lunchbox. Then she put away the lunchbox, stood up and patted the dust off her short skirt. Hey, I was just joking, you don't have to be so angry, right? Seeing that the girl was about to leave, Sushinshin could not help but feel a little bored. Recently, whether it was Chihaya or Yukata, they seemed to have mastered a way to deal with him. No matter what he did, they would ignore it. This was the most subtle situation that Sushinshin, who was somewhat crazy, found the most unbearable. I'm not happy. I want to destroy Fusang. So he simply rolled on the floor. Mo Lee, who was quietly eating a cucumber-flavored scallop, was shocked, and had an expression that said, "My lines have been pirated. You're a god, can you not do such childish things?" Chihaya helplessly sighed. It's just that today student Wu Yi. The president of the student union of Huanghua University asked for leave, and the other members have a lot of work to do, even I have to help deal with it. I was the one who snuck over to practice before lunch. You should be content. Usually they did not feel it at all, but when Wu Yejin was not around, the members of the student union suddenly realized, damn, the president has to deal with so much work by himself. Just how capable is that person? Then they all fell into a never-ending work hell. If it wasn't for the fact that they had no other choice, they wouldn't have asked Chihaya for help. As a god candidate, your life is really hard. Sushinshin looked at Chihaya sympathetically. I don't want to be told that by the current deity who huddles with housewives to fight for special deals during the supermarket sale. Chihaya made a face at Sushinshin and skipped down the White Bow Mountain. Mr. Landlord, I want to eat your lunchbox. Emoli came over and said coquettishly. Why don't you ask the guy next to you who is in a daze? Sushinshin asked in puzzlement as he handed over his lunchbox. I've already taken all the sausages inside. Emoli gave Sushinshin a thumbs up. This guy's desire to eat meat is still so strong. Is it because he is afraid of being poor in Sakura Apartments? Fortunately, I made a small fortune from the stalking Inyang master some time ago, so I can still afford to pay for his food. While Emoli was munching on his lunchbox, Sushinshin came to Hanaquin Yuan. Recently, she had also become a frequent visitor to the White Bell Shrine. When she had no classes, she often came here to drink the tea made by Sakura Kobayashi and to avoid a girl named Yasako. Before this, she seemed to only go to the library. Now the girl had a dull expression and stopped eating halfway through her lunchbox. This was not the first time he saw this expression. Now the girl must have connected her consciousness to the spirit-branded retainer she left in the exhibition hall. After they found the suspicious person the day before yesterday, they found the person twice in a row, but they lost him both times. They did not know how the person escaped. So in order to deal with this situation, the girl cast a special spell on her spirit-branded retainer. As long as the spirit-branded retainer detected someone with a similar appearance to that person, the spell would be triggered, and the girl's consciousness would be connected to the spirit-branded retainer to determine whether or not it was the person they were chasing. But whether it was because the spell was flawed or simply because there were too many suspicious people, Yuan would be absent-minded at least 17 or 18 times a day. If it were not for the fact that she did not talk much, someone would have noticed that something was wrong. Looking at the girl's slightly haggard and dull face, Sushinshin thought for a moment and then took out a marker pen. I don't think this is right, Goddessima. But before he could write the word meat on Yuyuan's forehead, he was stopped by Asahi Sakurakanji, who came out with tea. "No, Asahi, you've misunderstood," Su Shinxing said righteously. "It's just that Hanakia has been too tired recently. In order to make her happy, I'm going to do some harmless pranks. But I feel that if you do this, no one will be happy except yourself. Asahi, do you know that the emotions of gods can affect ordinary people? As long as I'm happy, everyone else will be happy." Su Shinxing continued to talk nonsense seriously. "I'm going to use pranks to make people smile. Goddessama, if you don't plan to stop, what? I'm going to change your toothpaste to mustard, put glue on your chair, fill your shampoo with paint, and hide 10 alarm clocks in your bedroom, all of which are set at 3 o'clock in the morning." Su Shinxing stared blankly at the girl, who was smiling brightly. "Not good, this girl is serious. The other pranks don't matter, but the paint one is too hurtful, so I have to be careful." So he could only regretfully put away the marker pen and give up the plan to prank the absent-minded Hanakia with the marker pen. Sakura Kanji showed a satisfied smile. "Speaking of which, Goddessa, haven't you caught the suspicious person yet? Because the person escaped too quickly. Although it's not impossible to catch him, it's meaningless. Besides, Hanakia won't be happy if I meddle too much. Anyway, it's not my home. Even if something is stolen here, it has nothing to do with Su Shinxing. Why should I waste so much effort for nothing? If Su Shinxing thinks like this, I'm afraid that the current Yinyang head of Yinyang Liao will feel that he's a bad judge of character from the bottom of his heart. But won't Hanakia have a hard time?" Sakura Kanji looked at the haggard girl and couldn't help but sympathize with her. "Can't you help seriously?" "Omelette rice." "Huh. The price of helping seriously." Su Shinxing scratched his head and showed a helpless smile. "I want to eat omelette rice for dinner." Asahi Sakura Kanji looked at Su Shinxing and then she smiled gently. "No problem. Why don't you leave it to me? I want to eat hamburger steak." Hearing that the topic changed to food, Emoli immediately raised his chopsticks and inserted himself into the conversation. Flower-shaped omelette on top. Chapter 99. When it came to helping seriously, Su Shinxing first thought of the tracking talismans that Xingyan Dream gave him. However, since he couldn't get the divine position back and he probably couldn't get it back, the only way to activate those talismans was to ask Emoli to go with him to the exhibition. Actually, Hanakeyuan's Reiki should be able to activate the talismans too, but Qin Xingyan didn't seem to like the practitioners from Fusang. Plus, the talismans made by some sects were secrets, so when Su Shinxing went here, Qin Xingyan repeatedly warned him not to show the talismans to the practitioners here. Although Su Shinxing also had doubts like, why is it okay to show it to me and Emoli? In the end, he attributed it to the girl's good intentions. No matter how active his mind was, he probably wouldn't have thought that those old guys in the Bailu temple were thinking of selling the talismans for export. After making a few calls to Qin Xingyan, he found that the other party's phone was always busy. Considering the price of international calls, Su Shinxing finally gave up on the idea of asking Qin Xingyan Dream for help. The number of visitors today seems to be a bit less than 2 days ago. Su Shinxing looked at the surrounding tourists and couldn't help but mutter. By the way, for the sake of saving costs, the three of them didn't buy tickets this time. They relied on Emoli's invisibility magic to sneak in. In this regard, Su Shinxing expressed that he was very disappointed that he didn't have the opportunity to use his proud skill, can't see me physics. It's not an interesting exhibition to begin with. The popularity will soon die down. Hanakeyuan explained casually, but after school on Sunday the number of people should pick up. That's more beneficial for us. Efficiency first. Hanakeyuan waved the phone in his hand and said coolly, let's split up. What, you're actually abandoning us? Su Shinxing's face was shocked. Then, Emoli took advantage of Yuan's confusion and ran over to hug her leg, cutely shouting. Mom. Suddenly, the surrounding tourists who were attracted by Su Shinxing's loud voice, imagined in their minds a 40-episode drama about family ethics and relationships. The reason why it wasn't an idol drama was that Su Shinxing's ordinary face didn't have any special features. It was a bit unfair to the audience. Oh, it's not. Su Shinxing's heart was filled with joy as he watched Chong Yu's little face turn red with shame and anger as she fled to the other exhibition halls. He finally fulfilled his dream of pranking her at noon. Yep, it's about time to be a little more serious. The reason why he did this wasn't just to prank her, but because Su Xinxing didn't want the girl to pay attention to her surroundings. The reason was simple, was that a certain suspicious persons to this exhibition. The farce just now had successfully attracted the other party's attention. At this moment, the big guy was looking at Su Xinxing with a harsh gaze full of scrutiny. However, because Su Xinxing's body had a mosaic halo without his permission, all the magic eyes that could detect other people's information and the vision with special observation ability would be affected, and they couldn't see any details about him. But for people who had this kind of ability, not being able to see any abnormality was the biggest abnormality. It was like playing a real-time strategy game and opening the whole map, but there was still a black spot on the map. It was hard for people not to notice it. The current situation was also the same. Oh, this time he actually dares to compare the size of my eyes. This suspicious person is too arrogant. After looking at the other person for a few seconds and finding that his eyes were not as big as the guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, Su Xinxing couldn't help but become angry. Now that there were many people in the exhibition hall, it would be a little troublesome to deal with the other person. It seemed that he could only get close to the other person with a punch that couldn't be seen by the human eye and was so fast that even the air couldn't detect it. At the same time, he had to be careful not to punch too hard. Otherwise, half of the other person's body would be blown away like the centipede a few days ago. After that, he had to pretend that the other person wasn't feeling well, supported his body in time, and took the unconscious person out of the museum with the excuse of taking him to the hospital. Then he would have the initiative to steam, boil, braise or fry him. Just as Su Xinxing was about to do it, the lights in the exhibition hall suddenly went out. Because it was evening, the sky was already dark, and the exhibition hall suddenly fell into darkness. At this moment, the suspicious man that Su Xinxing had locked onto had already pulled out two swords from somewhere. One was a regular katana with a thin green color on the blade. Even in the dark, it shone like a wolf's eye. The other was a short sword made of gold and silver that was 6 inches and 5 centimeters long. No matter which one it was lingering with a strong aura of death and resentment. It was likely that it had killed a lot of people, ghosts and demons. Although the burly man was burly, his movements were more agile than apes. With a kind of high-speed footwork that humans couldn't do, he rushed to the front of Su Xinxing and attacked Su Xinxing's vital points with the two swords respectively. The other person's swordsmanship hid nearly 1,000 changes. Even if Su Xinxing dodged now, no matter how he dodged, the other person only needed to slightly change the trajectory and cut him down with the swords. Well, of course it was just a saying. Su Xinxing, who had experienced hundreds of battles, didn't realize how exquisite the burly man's swordsmanship was. He only subconsciously kicked and the other person consecutively broke through several walls. His whole body flew straight out of the museum and hit his head on a taxi outside the museum. On the way, he spat out a mouthful of blood and the colorful magic tools on his body flickered and disappeared. It seemed that they were all overloaded and useless. I accidentally used too much strength. Su Xinxing couldn't help but show a regretful expression. It's all that guy's fault. He inexplicably ran to a position that was suitable for me to kick. I had no choice but to kick him. Mo Li patted Su Xinxing's shoulder with an inexplicable expression, and didn't comment on Su Xinxing's behavior. At this time the lights in the hall lit up again, but everyone's attention was attracted by the big hole in the wall. I found a suspicious person in that exhibition hall. Before Hua Kaiyuan, who hurried over, finished speaking, she looked at the human-shaped hole in the wall with a confused expression, and then looked at the innocent-looking Su Xinxing. Suddenly, the girl had a feeling that this deity who blamed her had caused a big disaster. In short, Su Xinxing said somewhat awkwardly, "I think that guy can still be saved." Chapter 100. Normally, what should one do to save a person? Emergency bandage? Bandages, medical tape and Holy Spirit medicine were not brought over from Sakura's apartment. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation? If he were to hit him with his palm, this guy would probably be dead by then. Mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? I choose a dog belt. Su Shenxing gave up on thinking and decided to call an ambulance for the unknown burly man as a passerby. Then he and Mo Li followed Hanakeyuan Yuan, who was the only one who was still uneasy, to track down the suspicious person that the girl found in another exhibition hall. Unlike the burly man that Su Shenxing found, who seemed to be a human with some special abilities, Yuan, who was sent away by him, was actually lucky. It was just that she lost track of the person because of the sudden power outage. Thinking that Su Shenxing might have a way to track the person, she came to ask for help. Otherwise, according to the girl's personality, she would probably chase after the person alone. Using the tracking talisman, the three of them really caught up with the suspicious person who didn't change his attire much on a road not far from the exhibition hall. The person seemed to be on high alert. After noticing that the three of them were coming, he immediately ran along the edge of the river by the road, using the various slopes, trees and bridge piers on the riverbank as cover to block the three of their vision. In theory, this kind of behavior shouldn't be very effective. After all, Su Shenxing had the ghost spirit to help track him, and Yuan had the Shikigami to help her. But this time, just like the previous two times, the person suddenly disappeared. Only the three of them were left behind. Is it a teleportation spell? Hanakeyuan Yuan looked under the bridge twice, but couldn't find any trace of the person. In the end, she could only guess. No, there were no fluctuations in space just now. Because he accidentally cut open space when he was practicing swinging his sword, what happened afterwards left a bad memory for our protagonist. So Su Shenxing was very sensitive to fluctuations in space. Water escape. Mo Li pointed at the river on the side. At this time, Su Shenxing suddenly remembered that when they failed several times in a row, the side of the road was either a river or a drainage ditch connected to the underground waterways on both sides of the road. If the other party was really the type that could use water to escape, as long as he could block the vision of the spirit demons and spirit-branded retainers for an instant, he would be able to escape from those places. As expected of Mo Li, who was the most proficient in magic among the three of them, he was actually able to guess the method that the other two had used to escape. However, even if it used water to escape, to be able to enter the water without leaving a trace, not even a ripple, it should be a relatively high-level aquatic creature. If Su Shenxing and the others were in Europe, they would be able to determine that the real culprit was either the high slimes or the Undine sprite. Unfortunately, perhaps because Japan was near the sea, there were many water elemental humanoid and half-humanoid monsters. The master of the sea market, the little monk of the cliff, the emerging conch, the bamboo maiden, the Chuan Yuan, the sea maiden room, the water demon, the turtle Chinku, the sea disaster magician, the little monk Lang, the cliff demon, the sea throne head, the sea ghost, the master of the rockfish market, and so on. Even the dried corpse of the kappa in the exhibition was an expert in this field when it was alive. By the way, the cultivators on the side of the Celestial Empire, apart from Hebo sea serpent, prawn soldiers, crab generals, and other monsters with special titles, the other aquatic monsters that were humanoid or half-humanoid were collectively called water monkeys. So theoretically, all deep-sea ships were basically water monkeys. In short, although they still couldn't catch the monster that coveted the treasure this time, they finally got some information about it. If they met it again, they could focus on this point and capture it. From this point of view, this operation could be said to be a big gain. But this couldn't make up for the loss of the Yin Yang Liao. In the short few seconds when the power was cut off, the Shimaru Kakadaka, which was placed outside the exhibition hall, was stolen. Dividing line. This was the exclusive underground hospital of the Yin Yang Liao in the capital. It was used to treat some symptoms that were difficult to understand with the pathology of the secular world, such as being cursed by the heavenly evil ghost, or difficult to treat with the medical standards of the secular world, such as being kicked by the gods. Tsuchimikado Genki walked through the long corridor. The medical staff who passed by him all bowed to him and he just nodded slightly. After turning a corner, he pushed open the door and walked into a ward. When he saw the patient on the bed who looked as though he had been hit by a train, his entire body was covered in white bandages with runes written all over it. He was even wearing a cast and could not move at all. At once, this man, who was often called the Fox of Yin and Yang, could not help but laugh out loud, which was a rare sight. This also made the man on the bed, who might have died 8 to 10 times in an ordinary hospital, realize that someone had come. "You're recovering well, Minamoto Genki." Tsuchimikado Genki restrained his expression and changed back to the usual fox-like fake smile. he said softly. Ordinary doctors will definitely want to dissect you to see what your body structure is like after seeing you recover so quickly. Humph, are you here to laugh at my appearance of a loser, Tsuchimikado Genki? Because his face was also covered by bandages like a mummy, his expression couldn't be seen. But Minamoto Genki was sure that his current expression was either anger or embarrassment. I remember that I once warned you not to provoke the G-Ogdi-sama over there, but you didn't listen. At that time I didn't know that guy was by Ling's G-O-D. This time Minamoto Genki didn't answer with a contemptuous attitude, but a little helpless. At the same time he also felt a burst of frustration deep in his heart. As one of the few powerhouses in Fuso, he, like his ancestor, received the teachings of Heavenly Crow Tengu and learned martial arts that ordinary humans couldn't master. After being recognized by Heavenly Crow Tengu, he inherited his ancestors' Tachi Bo Midori and short sword Jin Ken, which allowed him to stand at the peak of Fuso. Even Tsuchimikado Genki, who could completely rely on the power of martial song star, only had a 50% chance of winning against him. But yesterday the passerby face man who looked ordinary, but was actually very strange, shattered all his years of pride and glory with a kick. This body, which had been tempered thousands of times to obtain a defense that was far stronger than ordinary steel, was completely useless. If it weren't for the Tengu's talisman that Heavenly Crow Tengu gave him, the moon fragment that he obtained from the rabbit demon in the bright night bamboo forest, and some defensive treasures that he collected over the years, he would have been summoned by his master's pet, or all the G-Ogds in Huasha monsters. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.